Go. Reboot. Welcome to our live stream this morning discussing the clothing in Kingdom
Uh,
Come. Okay, so for those who don't know, the Hussite Wars are kind of a proto-Reformation movement that takes place in what's
mm,
kind of the modern day Czech Republic, Eastern Germany, Poland, Hungary, and it's considered highly dangerous because Jan Hus comes along with John Wycliffe in England, and he says, well, the church is really corrupt and they've completely misunderstood the scripture and they're misrepresenting it. And he gets a lot of followers, as most reformers do at some point or another. And so, of course, the church thinks this is highly dangerous. You know, the Pope thinks it's dangerous. The Holy Roman Emperor gets involved, of course, because he's supposedly the defender of the church. But it ends up just being a chance for everyone to fight over resources, as always. Anyway,
there we
yeah,
go.
this is Jan. This is Jan Hus. It's easy to find lots of pictures of him being burnt at the stake, if anyone is
Yeah.
wondering. Um, these, of course, they're all posthumous. No one thought he was worthy of a likeness in life. So you'll never find a contemporary picture of Jan Hus. My point being that
Mm.
if Jan Hus makes an appearance in the game, he will not look like any of these unless he's being burned at the stake, as gruesome as that sounds.
It's probably why I can't find them.
No, no, he was not, he was not he wasn't a king, he wasn't a potentate, he, wasn't a nobleman at all, really, so he doesn't have altar pieces depicting him praying in a corner somewhere. But goodness
Mm,
knows there are lots of chronicles from like the midpoint of the 15th century onward that are delighted to show him going up in flames. Um, yeah,
mm.
it's as I think I said, I commented to Ryan, it is gruesomely easy to find pictures of this man at the stake. Um, okay.
Yeah.
So here we have the first character we're going to discuss is Father, and I'm sorry, that says Baldwin. That should say Godwin.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. There
uh,
is another character called Baldwin in the game. That's where there's a bit of confusion going on, which is all he's also part of the monastic church as well. So it's like too many names being thrown around the place.
right. So actually, so then do I have Baldwin and Godwin on here, and we've just confused the two as being the
I think
same
that's
person.
just Godwin.
Oh,
That's a
that
picture
is
of
Godwin. Oh,
Godwin
good,
anyway.
brilliant. Okay, so this is Godwin, and he is a priest who goes. Could you tell me a little bit about him?
Well, Godwin is one of the priests over in more of the country area. If you, because the game is a big open world, if you get Henry and you march him off south, what was it, east, you'll come across a little small village off to the side where you'll bump into Father Godwin. And although he starts off kind of, at first his appearance is kind of like a basic normal priest, you can actually interact with the priest and eventually get to know him, and you can even go drinking with the priest, and you find out that he has a kind of mistress at the side, and he's not really the orthodox priest that we're kind of used to that gives sermons and stuff, and he has quite actually radical ideas.
Right.
And there's a few ideas kind of seeping into the small little village that's to the east of the main game itself, and he kind of gives us a kind of glimpse idea of things to come in the future,
Mm.
as the kind of, as we would now call, the Hussite Wars starts to build up in the background.
Right. So he is depicted in this game as wearing a kind of white robe and a
Mm,
blue sort of over tunic cowl thing. And then he's
mm,
also depicted in what look like arming garments to me, or padded
yeah.
garments. Yeah. So I'll talk about
Mm,
the first one, the ensemble in which he's doing his katas, I guess. Um,
yeah.
uh, so
Movements.
most people don't realize that warrior priests and warrior bishops were a medieval reality. There were many bishops
Mm,
who had full sets of armor in whatever the armor of their era, and they rode into battle and killed people. Um,
mm,
in Germany, especially, there were a lot of warrior bishops. Now, by the 15th century, there aren't as many doing that anymore. However,
mm,
there's the Walpurgis manuscript. So that's what the picture is on the right. There's a fighting manual from the early 14th century. So like the first quarter-ish of the 14th century is the kind of the current hypothesis of when it was written. And it's actually about monastic combat. And
Mm.
so it actually, you can see it depicts monks actually fighting sword and buckler.
Oh.
So, and it describes, it's a medieval fighting manual, and so to the best of Word's ability, it actually, tells you all these different moves and different defenses and strikes. And of course, buckler
Mm.
fighting is super, super challenging. So it's not beyond the pale that there would be a martial artist priest in the at the turn of the 1400, because 1400 only postdates the Walpurgis manuscript by roughly 70 years. So
Mm.
that part is actually possibly pretty realistic, not beyond the pale.
Mm.
Um, so I found a couple of, I didn't need to find too many depictions of priests and monks because they kind of all look the same. Now, different orders of priests, and that's why I asked you if you knew what order he belonged to, if he was a Dominican priest or a
Ah.
Cistercian priest or what. But it wasn't made clear in the game, I assume.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure because you just kind of come across him in the small little village. And when I was probing him for questions and stuff, he didn't seem to answer that. And I was quite ignorant at the time, to be honest with you. So I didn't really probe him for those kind of questions. I just thought it was quite interesting that he had a mistress and he was also a bit of a drinker as well and had a few radical ideas about the church, which kind of alarmed me. I was kind of shocked to hear that he wasn't the biggest fan of the papacy down south.
Oh, yeah.
So that I think that's what kind of drew my attention rather than which order he was part of.
Yeah, well, this being post-plague Europe, there are a lot of people now with ideas that maybe the church isn't the be all and end all that they thought it was, because when the plague came, everyone died, and
Mm-mm.
and if what the church had been preaching for centuries had been actually true, then the plague shouldn't have really happened that way.
Mm-mm.
And so there's a lot of people questioning authority and questioning what they've been taught. And of course, John Wycliffe's translation of the Bible into English is a real step in the direction of getting information out to a more massive audience. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that there would be a priest with very radical ideas and with a mistress, because actually, even priests without radical ideas had wives for the first millennium, and then after
Mm.
marriage was banned due to inheritance issues, then they just had mistresses. There's lots of really funny stories about that. The Decameron has a lot
Uh,
of bawdy stories
ours,
about, priests getting it on.
I, I screen has become frozen on the live stream. I was thinking that alright. So they can still hear us, but the screen has been frozen. I'm
Oh,
not quite sure how to fix that one.
oh,
Um,
oh, technology making it
oh, the
easier.
Druids.
We could we could try to reconnect.
Because I don't, it's not Discord, no,
Yeah,
Discord is causing the problem this time. It is going to either be the OBS or
right.
YouTube itself. So it might be the OBS.
Oh boy. Okay. Yeah, audio is great, but the screen is frozen. Yeah. Okay. So then, if it's the OBS, there's not much I can do about that. Because if we if
Yeah.
if we disconnect from the OBS, we'll lose the stream.
Mm.
But I guess we can try. Okay, we can try one more time. I mean, it's the only thing we really can do reasonably without just starting a whole new stream, which I guess we could also do. But then, all the
We could
links to this.
just go in and out.
Yeah, we'll
Maybe because it seems like
yeah, okay, everyone, stand by. We're going to disconnect from Discord again and come back in and see if that this didn't happen at all when we ran a trial run. It ran smooth as could be. Okay.
so it seems to be grand on the Discord stuff. Discord side seems to be grand. It seems to be the OBS and the YouTube side, the connection between
Yeah.
that seems to be frozen.
Well, let's try again. We'll go ahead and disconnect from the Discord and reconnect. Everyone, stand by. So we're back, everyone. Uh, and it's not liking that share. Oh, this is so irritating. I spent literally 8 hours putting this presentation together yesterday.
No. But this, yeah, we'll definitely have to do it on Zoom next time.
Yeah.
Um, what was it?
Well, we could, I mean, I can just do uh, an ad hoc setup and we can just, I mean, because YouTube will send out the word and whoever manages to see it can see it. Because it's going to be kind of silly without the imagery. uh, yeah, I don't know. Let me stop. Let me see. I'm going to stop sharing. Um, okay. I've stopped the, yeah, I spent a good long time putting this thing together yesterday because the Hussite War was a proto-Reformation movement. You're never going to guess what happened in the roughly 20 years, 30, almost 30 years that this conflict went on. Can you guess what
Hmm.
those proto-reformist people did to artwork in this part of the world?
Oh no.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Oh no.
They
I
destroyed
said
it.
things like,
They destroyed
no,
it. So there is
I did not know that.
yeah, they did. They okay. Okay, so we've got at least we've got that. Can can you see the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can see the PowerPoint.
Great. Okay. What is it looking like on? Of course, there's
It's
probably
just
a lag.
it's decided it wants to play another ad. So give us a second. Um, oh no, we're up and going.
Okay, great. Well, let's see how long that goes. Uh,
Yeah, hopefully it'll work. Can everyone hear us at home and stuff?
yeah. How's the sound, everyone? Um, okay. I'm not certain how to change. Oh wait, gallery. Let's see. Wonder if I can.
It's just
Oh,
a
there we go. Okay,
beautiful.
brilliant. Okay, so back to why artwork is so hard to find in this era. I'll finish that and then get back to the priest here. So yeah, the Hussites, just like the uh, reformists of the 16th century, went through and just destroyed religious artwork. They burnt
Hmm.
manuscripts. They tore frescoes down. They destroyed statues. So finding artwork that depicts anything from Bohemia itself is a real challenge. There isn't much
Hmm.
that has survived of which we know. So a lot of the imagery we're going to have today is from Austria, Germany, France, a little bit from Poland. There is some from Bohemia that survived because those manuscripts happened to be in someone else's library when the iconoclasts came through. But
Hmm.
that's okay because Sigismund. What do you know? Do you know anything about Sigismund, Philip?
I just know, to be honest with you, it's way out of my field of expertise. But what I do know is that he does eventually become Holy Roman Emperor. He is mentioned in the movie The Last Duel, because The Last Duel is set around that period as well. And he appears, he's kind of one of those characters that kind of appears here and there. Once you know his name, you'll notice he appears here and there, both in movies and in literature. So he definitely has an impact on world politics, especially since he is originally the King of Hungary and then eventually pushes his way in and becomes Holy Roman Emperor as well.
Yeah.
And he is also involved with a French crusade into the Ottoman Empire when the French end up getting choppity chopped.
Yeah,
So he's there.
Nicolopoulos. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am fully aware of his politics, well, his crusades against the Ottoman Empire. I am aware of his politics with the Germans and especially with the Bohemians. And of course, he is constantly fighting the Hussite wars. So I suppose all in all, I am aware of his little bit of mention in the last duel. because he's around that
Right,
period. And then his crusades are constantly kicking off here, there, and
right.
everywhere. So
But
he must have a quite interesting relationship with the Pope, I imagine.
oh God, it's a mess. But do you know where he's from? He's actually he's from the House of Luxembourg. The House of
Oh,
Luxembourg took
really?
over the Kingdom of Bohemia, yeah, in the 15th century, excuse me,
Ah,
14th century. And so he's
mm,
actually, he's born, and they're not certain whether he was born in Prague or Nuremberg, but my point is that he's actually a
ah,
very international character, right? Like you said, he's
mm,
the son of Wenceslaus, King Wenceslaus, the famous one from the song, and so
mm,
he's German, he's French, he's Hungarian, he's Bohemian, he's like this very international player, and he actually travels to England and France, in addition to those other places you mentioned. So he's a real international person. So to me, that's going to impact the kind of clothes he could have and probably did wear, and also his armor.
mm.
So it's he and yeah, you're right. He becomes eventually he vies for the position of Holy Roman Emperor, and he gets it. Um, yeah. So coming back to our priest here, yeah. So that the original outfit, um, the one in the game you see here, is actually I actually found in the later 15th century there is a priest right there looking exactly like that, and it wouldn't surprise me, honest to God, if the developers didn't find this exact tapestry, because it's a pretty
Yeah,
famous one. Not many tapestries have survived. It's a pretty
yeah,
famous
as you were
one.
pointing earlier.
Yeah, so that actually looks. I'm actually impressed. That actually looks pretty reasonable. Um, but I think it's probably specific to an order, and I was trying to figure out. I couldn't remember if it's the Dominicans who have the black cowl and the white tunic or not. Anyway, but
Mm.
you know, the thing about him is that he's not tonsured. He's clean shaven, so I'm not certain if he's supposed to be
Ah,
bald, but he should be tonsured. He shouldn't be clean shaven.
mm,
Yeah. As for his arming garments, yeah, I mean, it's not bad. I've seen worse. The hat, though. So this hat is way post period for this era. This hat is like 100 years
really?
too early um, for him.
Oh,
That's
right,
more.
that
That's
is a
more.
problem.
Yeah, that's more of like a 1490s hat, not a 1400 hat. So that's
Mm.
yeah. Just so people know, if you want to do a 1400 impression, this is not the hat for you.
Yeah, I know, all right, that the accuracy of the first game was one of the biggest complaints, and I knew the makers said going into the second game that they would definitely make corrections. But as you were saying earlier, there's still little problems here and there that needs to be judged with a fine-tooth comb. So we'll definitely be reviving this in next month to see
Yeah.
what the developers got right,
I'm
what they got wrong going into the second game.
I am super. I've already, just based on the screenshots alone, I'm already gearing up.
Oh no.
Fight, 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 fight. um, okay. If anyone has any questions about our Father Godwin, just pop them in the chat and we'll get to them. But we're going to go ahead and move on for now until we see more chatter on that. Oh, yes. So some more pictures of priests, just to give you all an idea. As you can see, there's kind of a common theme of sort of semi-voluminous tunic with a
Mm.
hooded cowl, and the tonsuring is just really common. And apparently, if you're a priest, you should sit there calmly and just be shot by arrows. Um, no, that's the
So it's
martyr.
the
That's
whole.
yeah. Go on.
Yeah, I was just about to say that it's kind of the running theme in the game, especially because our friend Godwin here, he's very radical in himself. And when I originally played the game years back now, I was completely unaware of the High Wars. I didn't realize how radical it was. But even back then, when I first came across him, I was like, this guy's got a kind of hint of martyrdom going on about him. And then, of course, when I found out about the High Wars, I was like, he's definitely somebody that wants to be a martyr. And as I delved deeper in the game, I seen that he was actually trained to use the sword, that he has all this armor and stuff, which is all hidden dialogue. It's all hidden in the first game and stuff, which I assume, and this is my guesswork now going into the second game, and I could be right about this. I have a funny feeling he might join the radicals,
Wow,
and
really? Hmm.
yeah, just have a funny feeling, just a funny feeling in my heart.
Yeah, well, he will be joining an army of tens of thousands because yeah, in this era, there's a lot of people who realize there's been a lot of injustice that's been perpetuated by the church, and
Mm.
they realize, and the worst part is they're starting to realize there's no scriptural basis for it. So, you
Ah.
know, it's one thing if God wants there to be injustice. It's another thing if you realize it's a bunch of corrupt, powerful men who've been engaging in injustice. Yeah. Yeah, so for those who don't know, these clothes would have been made of wool, and priests wore hair shirts as an undergarment generally, especially priests who actually believed in, you know, walked the talk, as it were. So a hair shirt is made from goat hair usually, or sometimes horse hair. They're really prickly, and wool, the kind of wool that they would have been wearing was probably also prickly. It was not going to be the high caliber wool. So, you know, this was kind of this. These clothes were a way to mortify the flesh, also. But, you know, of course, there are plenty of priests who were not into the whole priestly thing, and you know, wore fine garments, fine linen, fine wool, fine silk. So, you know, I assume Father Godwin is probably in the mortifying the flesh category of priest based on his radical beliefs.
Ah. It's very funny because he also in the game is into drinking and being with women. Like he has a mistress at the side and stuff. So to me, his beliefs are kind of alien to me because
Mm.
on one side he's very radical, but on the other side he believes in drinking and being with other women. So his ideas is so strange and alien to me. You know?
Yeah, it's it's not it's funny because I certainly know have read records of many such priests who well, usually they had conventional ideas on the outside, and then on the inside they, like you said, they had their mistresses on the side. There's actually a saying, a medieval saying, um, that reflects the reality of monks and priests, and you know, the saying is from mass straight to the table. The idea being
Uh,
that monks, and you know, just kind of bounced back and forth between eating and praying and eating and praying, and that they, you know, weren't actually living an ascetic life. So he kind of reflects that reality. And God knows, by the time Martin Luther comes along, you know, it's gotten worse. So, you know, eventually, pretty
yeah.
soon, in about 80 years from now, we're going, or 90 years from now, we're going to have a pope who has multiple children. So uh, the
Oh
Borgia,
God, they probably
yeah,
already have. Just keep it hidden away.
exactly. So you know, the Borgia Pope is the first to really go full public with
Yeah.
all of his activities, shall we say?
I was Yeah, I was just thinking about himself as well. Oh, we're going over to the Miller now.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and switch over to the Miller. If there's any, I can't really see the live chat because it interferes. I turned my TV off because I was worried it was interfering with the with the bandwidth. I'll try. I'm gonna have to.
So far, we haven't got any questions
Okay,
yet.
great.
Not that I can see of. But if anybody does have any questions, definitely comment below because I'm here reading the comment section. Going between my little cheat sheet and the comment section. So obviously. Send your comments up there, and I'll have an old gander in, and obviously just push Rachel out of the way anytime that a question needs to be answered. So yeah, tell us about the Miller. I am aware of him in the game because of his relationships with. It was Henry's female friend, which as a player you can get to know later on. But the Miller gives a spot for Henry to kind of sleep for the night when he's being a refugee. And the Miller is kind of a funny character
Hmm.
because not only is he, doing his job as a Miller, which Rachel can tell me all about in a second, but he also has a few shady jobs at the side that if the player wants to, he can kind of question and get talking to and stuff. And eventually he'll give him a few kind of thieving questions, as in anytime Henry kind of robs something, he can go and sell it to the Miller, and the Miller will also tell him to kind of go and sneak one thing from one spot over to another spot for him, and do a few other dodgy kind of jobs for him around the town and stuff. So kind of job would a miller have at that period?
Yeah, so
You
that's
know?
that's that's very that's funny because so I went and I specifically pulled out the description of the miller from Chaucer's Canterbury Tale because of course the miller is one of his key characters, and also this
Mm,
image right here on the bottom left is actually from one of the earliest editions of the Canterbury Tales depicting the miller. So it describes him as having a white coat and a blue hood, wert he, a bagpipe well could he blow in sown, and therewithal he brochte us out of towne. So you can see the we've got the miller here. He's armed, right? He has a buckler and a sword because he's going on
mm.
pilgrimage, and that's dangerous. So it's interesting
Ah.
because Chaucer actually describes him as wearing a white coat, and the coat is just basically kind of a semi-fitted tunic. Probably you can't see it, but it should have
Mm,
buttons down the front. And so they've actually dressed this miller in a white tunic kind of thing. So the miller's job was literally the miller owned and operated the mill, and the mill was for
mm,
grinding grain. People, why would you grind your grain at home on a little stone mill if you have this industrial mill, which is generally driven by wind power, by the way? That's what windmills are. Most people don't know that. A windmill is to
mm.
use wind power to grind your grain so you can make bread, right? So the miller's job was people would bring their grain to him and pay him to grind their grain.
Mm.
So it's funny that you mentioned that this miller is into dubious activities because Chaucer's miller is as well. Chaucer's miller, and this was a known
Ah.
this was a known foible of millers. They would pinch some of the product they were grinding and keep it for themselves, and then eventually store up enough to sell their own ground flour, right? So
Ah.
Uh, so yeah, that this miller in the game is acting as a fence for stolen goods, in my mind, isn't necessarily beyond the pale, considering that it's just one short step from pinching, scraping some off the top and just outright selling stolen goods. Um,
Mm, mm,
so
mm.
yeah, the thing about this miller though, his clothing, and I'm going to talk about belts in a little more detail later, because I actually have a whole section on belts because there's a lot of belts in these
Mm.
screenshots. This belt looks very odd to me. It's a very modern looking belt, and it's weirdly truncated, and it doesn't have a strap end on it, and it's very not decorated. I mean, millers were middle class, right? They were, depending
Mm.
on their success, lower or middle class, but they were middle class citizens. They were not poor. They could afford nice things. The thing that's odd about this miller, and I've got the miller in the center there. That's actually from 1426 or 1425 Nuremberg.
Mm.
But you can still see, you want a spacious garment that allows you to move, so you can, do the things you need to do to keep the mill in operation. Things are constantly breaking down. And he should be wearing a cowl. Our miller is not wearing a cowl for whatever reason. Um, and the boots, you can barely see them. I should have tried to lighten this, actually. That's on me, mea culpa. But I can see them, and they don't look too bad on this, our Miller here, Miller Peshek. He's got kind of like mid-calf boots, and you can see that actually lines up with both of our Millers, really. I mean, the Miller on the left has
Yeah.
kind of ankle boots, and they look like turn shoes, so they don't have soles. I'm not too mad at this. The only thing that's kind of weird is this tunic that he's wearing is very narrow, and you can see,
Ah.
it should be more space. It would be hard to get this on. I mean, I'll be honest. This tunic is so narrow that it would be difficult for him to actually take it on and off. It's just because it doesn't have any
Ah.
closures, so
Mm.
it would be a bit of a squeeze. But also, he'd want more room to move around doing his job. But also, the shoulders have, you can see he's got an inset. If you look closely at the arm's eye, it's got like a round arm's eye
Yeah.
shape, and that's not appropriate at all. That's not this period. We're going to talk about sleeve settings here in a bit. Either you have this thing called a grande assiette, or you've got a kind of geometric construction of rectangles put together, and it creates a completely different shoulder look. So this is more of a modern silhouette, actually.
Ah. So we have errors right away.
Yeah, we do. The hat isn't bad, and I've got a whole section on hats. It's it's a little, possibly a little early for this, quite this style of hat, because basically what
Mm.
people kind of did is took the hood. If you see the cowl, the two gentlemen on our left, the two other millers, the original millers, they have that cowl, that hooded cowl, right? So what people started doing was taking that off and rolling up the front part of the hood and sticking that on their head, and then having
Oh.
the drapey part of the shoulder cape on one side and the draping, the lyra pipe, the point on the other side. And that's where that look actually kind of originated, that baggy rolled
No
hat.
way.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, so if you have a hooded cowl, you can turn it into a completely different piece of headgear just by rolling the front of the hood and sticking that on the crown of your head, and then arranging the other
Mm,
bits as
mm.
you like. Yeah.
That's wild, all right. How it all links up. Once you start digging in, you can find the origins of a lot of things like that. Absolutely wild. You were also hinting at the character because the character may be based off the character you had found. Do you think it's a? Do you think the game might be hinting that the Miller, might be joining the Hussite rebellion later on?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. If he's into fencing things, yeah, yeah. He's there's I he would be, he would have, he might not have the usual skills you would need in an army, because milling isn't a portable profession. Um, but his his connections to sell fenced goods, especially, so yes, it might be a religious war, but you and I both know that wars always involve looting, and loot is only useful as a
Yeah.
currency, right?
Mm.
So I could well see that he joins the army and loots unrighteous members of the opposing faction, or
Yeah, he
yeah,
might do.
yeah. And even if he doesn't, I mean, even if he doesn't get out there with sword and or, well, actually, at his level, he's probably not going to be fighting with a sword. He's probably going to be fighting with some more peasanty like tools, like a flail or something,
Mm.
um, the
Yeah.
the kind used for threshing grain. Um, but
Mm.
yeah, I think he would be a useful contact to have, for at least for the people who are out there looting and bringing goods back.
Mm. And he's already quite close to Henry anyway. Even if you don't go off and do Henry's quests with him, the fact that he gave Henry a place to stay while his own kind of where he's from, Skelligs, is being attacked and burned, kind of gives you an idea that if he does see Henry again, he'll be like, "Oh, you owe me a thing or two," you know?
Right, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, let me have some of that rich fabric you looted from that count's tent in the campaign field. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
There's another thing I'm looking at. I just noticed a little more closely on he's got something weird going on with his sleeve on the, what is, I guess, his left but our right. It's like
Um,
he's got like a super sleeve, or like a separate sleeve he's put on underneath of the rolled up sleeve of his tunic, and I'm not certain what's going on there. I've never seen evidence of that kind of like extra sleeve, or protective sleeve in this era. People just generally roll up their sleeves and their arms get dirty or whatever, and they just deal with it. It's
mm.
yeah. Okay. Any other questions about our Miller, Peshek?
Any other question, guys, about anything?
Yeah.
Easily pop it into the
Yeah.
comment section. We don't really have too many questions right now,
No.
so we'll just kind of plow along.
Yeah.
Who do we have next?
We've got
Let me get over to my cheat sheet.
the
Ah,
blacksmith.
yes. Oh, Henry's father.
Yeah. The blacksmith.
Yeah, poor Henry's father gets deleted very early on the game when the Cumans and Hungarians march into Bohemia, and sadly, Henry and the blacksmith ends up getting caught within all the violence that happens, and poor Henry gets knocked off over to the side down south to Bohemia, and Martin, the blacksmith, ends up deleted from the game in front of poor Henry. Meaning that Henry, witnessing his father being deleted, decides he's going to take vengeance
Right.
later on, probably going into the second game. So, how is the blacksmith dressed? Is it appropriate, or is it
Not
complete
not
fantasy,
It's
more like
very
an
fantasy.
art out?
I mean, it's a mix. it's a mix. So first off, positives, the shoes. The shoes again look
Mm,
pretty spot on. Again, they're turn shoes, they're ankle boots, they have buckles. I've got some a picture later on of an extant buckle boot like that from the late 14th century. So that's all good, and you
mm,
can see we have an original 14. This is 1420s blacksmith from Nuremberg, also in ankle boots. So I'm happy with that. But again, the silhouette, the way the shoulders are, like he looks again like an American football player. That is just not the kind of sleeve inset that you have in this era. You don't have these very, like it almost looks like they're wearing 80s shoulder pads. Um,
mm,
that's that's not the right look. The round arm's eye, like that style of round arm's eye, is just not a thing in this era. And again,
mm,
their garments are a little too tight. You want, especially as a blacksmith, you want garments that are going to allow the air to flow around your body, because otherwise you're going to get really sweaty and it's going to be uncomfortable. And I'm this apron. These aprons are 100% modern. This is just not the kind
yeah.
of apron they had in the Middle Ages. I don't know why, but they didn't. So I've got a bunch of blacksmith pictures to show you the different kinds of aprons. So first off, our smith here, you'll notice, has a waist apron. Um,
Mm,
and it's most likely leather. You can't, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell from a drawing, but the way it's hanging in this particular picture, leather is okay. It's just that the shape is not correct at all. Here we have
mm,
another smith from the same period. Again, just a waist apron,
yeah.
not a full apron. And then a little bit later, oh, I meant to do something about that. Well, hopefully I don't get pinged for that. I meant to find a different image, but oh well, here we go. This one is a little bit later. The one on the right, it's the 1450s, but still, you can see that the only apron in the picture is this has just this little tiny triangle that covers the chest, and the straps go around the
Mm,
neck. They don't. It's not this like full body apron that modern smiths would have worn. Another image, mid 14th century, just to kind of round out the 100 years of smithing around this period. Again, just a waist apron. So the reason I think, I mean, so that doesn't make sense to you, right? Like, why would you only wear a waist apron?
mm.
What do you, I mean, you're smithing. What do you think? Would you wear just a waist apron?
Well, from a modern perspective, I wouldn't have, and that's why I think maybe that's why they went for more of a modern interpretation.
So do you know why? I think I have a theory about why they didn't need to wear an apron that was more extensive, and that's because they were wearing wool. Wool. What
Oh,
what do you know
yes.
about wool and its properties? Do you know anything about
Well,
what?
it's far.
Yeah, go on.
It's far superior than the plastic we're wearing today. I did make a short, when was it, Friday, giving out about these things not being breathable.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, there's a lot of people, especially in Ireland right now, giving out about, because wool right now is pretty much going for nothing. They're literally trying to give it away because there's too much wool being produced. So a lot of people in Ireland
Seriously?
right now are giving out about the
I'll take
plastic
the wool.
clothing.
I want the wool. Give me your
Yeah.
surplus wool. Oh
New
my
Zealand
God.
as well. I was talking to people, so I reposted it on to add more context onto the video, which is on my short. And in it, I was talking to New Zealand farmers. Exact same problem. They're trying to give away the wool because Ireland and New Zealand produce more wool than it should, and now everybody's more into plastic. And because if you were to sell all that wool, it would undermine all the
Right.
plastic being produced. They have to basically just throw
Oh my God.
it away. And I'm like, "Shh."
Oh my God.
Especially a few years back when I was doing all the living history and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, I could have had that for free.
Oh my God. Okay, I need to know, is are they giving away like the raw wool, or are they giving away woven?
It's on. Jump onto my short and it has the girl on it. I'll find the
Okay,
information. I'll
I'll
find
go.
the girl and stuff
I'll go
because
check it out.
she's using wool for just the most randomest. She has a whole field full of wool, just using it for the most random stuff, trying to get rid of it. Even trying to use diesel to get rid of it is more, it costs more money. They're just doing whatever. They just don't know, even know what to do with it,
Oh
and they
my
still
God.
have to deal with the sheep. The sheep need to be sheared,
They have to be
so
sheared.
they just
Yeah.
have loads of leftover wool.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the modern sheep breeds, the wool producing breeds, have been bred to produce monstrous amounts of wool. And if you don't shear them, they will
Mm.
literally die of an impacted bowel because the wool will cover up their anus. Isn't that horrible?
Mm.
So,
Yeah, I've come across that because once in a while the sheep get lost up in the mountains and stuff, and you'll find they'll get stuck like in those random spots, but they'll be covered. They'll actually not die of starvation. They'll die of, or sorry, not the elements and starvation. They'll die of
yeah,
the wool before they will. So you'll see them
yeah.
stuck in some weird spot,
Mm.
and just the whole spot is just covered in wool. So yeah, I've actually seen that with my own eyes.
God.
Horrible,
But
absolutely horrible.
but
Like,
oh my God, this is so tragic. So everyone, the reason wool, many reasons that wool is a superior fabric. One, if it's not woven to be airtight, it breathes in all conditions. So I've worn wool, full wool 15th century gowns in Thailand. 35, 37, 38, 39 degrees outside, 95% humidity, and I was comfortable. First off.
mm,
Second, for the purposes of smithing, as you said, Philip, it's not a petrochemical. It breathes, but also wool is naturally fire retardant. It will actually
mm.
snuff
Oh,
itself. So you don't need to wear protection because your clothes aren't going to catch on fire if they're wool. That's why kitchen servants wear wool, pretty much uniquely. So yeah, these
that's absolutely. It's a nice little test to see if the other reenactors have wool or not in their clothing or a bit of
right.
plastic on them.
Yeah, it's if anyone wants to check it out, you can do a little experiment. Get a pure wool. You have to make sure it's pure wool. If it has petrochemicals in it, it's not gonna work. But pure wool will literally, you'll
Yeah,
light it on fire and it will instantly go out. It won't even burn.
just be careful of that if you are doing living history and stuff. Sometimes I've come across this, especially early on when I was putting together, getting my clothes and all that stuff. People were sneaking in plastics into the clothing to make it more cheaper. So before you start doing these experiments, make sure you know where you got your all your clothing from, because there's no point doing this experiment as a blacksmith and then finding yourself up on fire. Like,
Yeah,
so definitely make sure, go 100%, make sure that the source is 100% wool, because endless amount of times it may still be bits of plastic in my clothing back home in Ireland and stuff. Definitely in the first pairs of tunics and stuff I got, definitely has plastic in it. There's no two ways about it.
yeah,
Like, very
no,
early on, I was
yeah.
very innocent to the whole idea of plastic and stuff. And even the new stuff I got back in 2019, it probably still has plastic in it. I don't know.
Yeah, my first, we're not even gonna go there. Okay, anyone, if you have
The joys.
any questions about anything, even if it's not something we've talked about, if it's something we had no plans to talk about, don't forget to put them in the comments. And just a reminder, please hit that thumbs up. And please go check out Philip's channel, Irish Medieval History, on all the social media, on YouTube. Subscribe. He's got really great stuff. Okay, plug over.
Mm, mm, mm.
Okay, this guy.
Oh, uh,
Oh
the
my
one
God.
everyone bitched about the most. Oh, the second most bitched about character in the game.
Who was the first?
We should be 1 second. See, I'll have a quick look at my cheat sheet. Oh no, you don't have him. It is actually there's another noble, and he was more bitched about
Oh God, okay.
than this character. It's Ron's. I think it's his name in English anyway. I think it's Ron's or something, and he's this big leather jacket in his front
Oh my
and with
God.
the studs all over. He was the first most bitched about. This guy was the second most bitched about character
Okay.
for the clothing.
Okay, so yeah, when I saw this, when you sent me this screenshot, I thought to myself, what is Henry VIII doing here? So yeah, so this is what his clothing reminds me of, is 14,
Mm,
1530s men's clothing, like a slightly less voluminous
yeah.
version of it. It is so just not even vaguely appropriate for this era at all. The puffed, those capped sleeves that you see, the puffy shoulder sleeves on his doublet, question mark, those don't even come into fashion, they don't come into existence until the mid 15th century. And this kind of overgarmenty thing he's wearing with, I think, the turnback collar, yeah, that like I said, that's a Tudor, like solidly Henry VIII. I mean, God, even looks like Henry VIII at a slightly less puffy phase.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't. The pattern is wrong. I don't know what kind of closure that's supposed to be, but that's not right. I don't. The skirts, I'm not certain what's going on there with the yellow and
Yeah.
black panels. Like I don't even know
And
what
what's
that's supposed to
funny
mean.
about this is they interviewed the creator of all this, and she turned around and she said that the historian gave her all the sources, and she kind of wanted to put her own mark on the character.
Oh
And it's
God.
like I remember hearing the same thing when it was the I think it was the movie The 13th Ronin, and the artistic designer, that's what they call them. The artistic designer was given all the historical stuff, 100% historical, and then decided they wanted to put their own mark on the character. And I
For
think that's what
sure.
happens sometimes is they get kind of overexcited.
Yeah, there's everyone talks about creativity. Well, there's a way to be creative within the aesthetic of the time, right? Like no one says you have
Mm,
to exactly reproduce that portrait of John the Fearless, for instance. But you should take the same shapes and just add different colors and maybe different patterns. But yeah,
mm,
this weird checky thing, I don't even know what's going on there. That's not. There's no. I have
mm,
never ever ever seen fabric like that in the 14th or 15th century in Central or Western Europe, and not really even in Eastern
mm.
Europe. Uh, and then there's this conquistador looking breastplate that he's wearing is just
Ugh.
absolutely not the right silhouette for a breastplate in this era. It's not the right um, decorative elements for a breastplate in this era. I actually went and found an extant breastplate from the 14 era, yeah, breastplate slash here. I'll show it here. Yeah, so here
Mm.
to the right specifically is a gorgeous,
Uh,
a gorgeous coat of plates from like I'm honestly I'm looking at this and I really thought 1400 myself, and it's covered in velvet
mm,
because silk velvet because in this era people were often covering their clothes their armor in beautiful rich fabrics to imply that not only could they afford the beautiful expensive plate armor, they could afford the beautiful expensive fabric that's just going to get cut and bled upon to go on top of it. So this is the
mm.
silhouette that breastplates should have in this era. You can see it's kind of got this pigeon chest to the waist, and then from the waist down, it's narrow and fitted, right? That's kind of what should be happening. And this guy, this this gentleman is, yeah, that's just not it. It's it's just not. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
too much creative design.
way too much. I'm going to talk about his belts later, plural. He's got like three belts on.
Yeah,
um,
yeah, it's a bit mental, all right. Like one to hold his sword, the other one to hold his mug or something. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. He's got one for his waist, one for his sword, one for his accessories, I guess. Is he a
Yeah.
knight? Hanush is he's a knight or a nobleman, right?
He is, it says in his description, if you go into the game, that he is the overseer because and Hans is a young noble who becomes friends with Henry later on. If you manage to follow the story of Vengeance and stuff, eventually Henry meets a guy called Hans, and then you can do a side quest. But Hans is the actual nobleman of Rati, which is the settlement that's just down in the south. And this character that we were just looking at, he is it says in a description, the nobleman who's the overseer of the land.
Mm.
While it's basically what was the correct term again? The, God, what
Steward
was it again?
or
When you have one
seneschal?
person, was that?
Was he the seneschal?
Yeah, yeah, the person who's put in charge
Yeah.
just before the noble comes of age. So if his two parents pass
Oh,
away early,
regent.
then
He's a
you've got someone
regent.
else who gets
Got
richer.
it. Okay.
That's the word
Right.
regent. So he's basically it says on the description he's the overseer, but I think regent is more correct.
Right. So he's got to be an aristocrat. Like he has to be a nobleman
Yeah,
if he's in that position. Yeah. So he should definitely have nice things, shall we say? And I'm going to talk about
yeah.
what he should. We'll get into what he should be wearing when we get to Sigismund. Well, to Hans actually, and then to Sigismund, which we're about to get to. Any other? What do you have? Any other? One other thought I had is, so what the hell? Why on earth does he have a? Why does he have a bow and arrows at all? Because he's a nobleman. B, why is
Yeah.
that quiver strapped to his back?
Why is the quiver strapped on his
It should be
back?
at his
I don't.
waist. It should be at you. Archers didn't carry their bows on their back in Europe. They carried them on a belt at their waist because it is. If anyone
I
actually
think that
tries to
gets
get
fixed
arrows
in the
off
second
quickly,
game.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Because I do remember all that stuff started so many arguments a few years ago when this game first came out. But this entire character made entire arguments. Like he's a creative abomination in my opinion. And
yeah.
I don't
No,
want to
he
sound
is.
bad. If the creator is watching this and stuff, I don't want to sound bad, but well, maybe you should just stick to the historical stuff.
Yeah, especially when you're given the material.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and it's to say he's not the only one. There's another character he's an even bigger abomination. It was the other character that is the noble up where what was his name? Henry, the main character, is from, and he just has a brown leather top, a big massive armor leather thing with studs sticking out of it, and
Or
it's
studs.
just the
Always
worst
studs.
creation I've ever seen in my life.
Always studs.
Um, I think for him, they definitely wanted the whole kind of Henry VIII look with the hunter to give you a kind of quick hunter idea or something. I don't know what they were really trying to ultimately do, but I definitely think whoever was the creative of this was definitely thinking Henry VIII. I definitely think when I first seen it as well, I was definitely thinking, are they trying to get the old Henry VIII? The
Yeah,
kind of
it's
go on, let's go for a hunt, and afterwards go off for our 8 wives or so.
yeah, right.
Maybe that's what they were thinking. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I definitely, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I just noticed. So I really think that the graphic art or the artist, the designer of this character really looked at these Tudor era, 1530s kind of clothes. Because if you look at his collar, both on all these men,
Mm.
they've got that bunched up white collar of their undershirt. And if you look at Hanush, he's got that going on too. So
Yeah,
I really feel like
I definitely thought that's
she
true.
or they, whoever they were, ignored whatever was given to them and just decided, I want this guy to look like Henry VIII. And I mean, he's even got the Henry VIII paunch. Look at that. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, they definitely even the way he behaves and stuff around the court, the hall. Definitely was inspired by Henry VIII, and this person just wanted to. This person, when they were doing out their CV and stuff, they must have just when they were being interviewed, went on and on about how they loved the medieval period and stuff. They must have talked about the Tudors and that,
oh my God.
because it definitely didn't actually have any historical background. And I don't want to like if the person is watching this,
Yeah.
I don't even know. I'm justifying myself. It's terrible. Like,
No, I mean, it's not that it's badly drawn or badly rendered. It's just not a historical character. That's what it comes down to,
yeah.
right? That's
Oh, it's terrible.
we're here to talk about history, not quality of graphics. So, okay,
Mm-mm-mm.
let's move on to Hunt.
Hans, the yeah, Hans is some character. He's the classic young noble. He hasn't taken over the area yet. Obviously, his caretaker we just literally just talked about. But this young chap, maybe he's more historically accurate because when I looked at it, I was like, "Doesn't look too bad." But
Mm,
Rachel, maybe you'll
yeah.
completely tear him apart now. Oh, you will.
No, he's definitely wearing what I call medieval market or Ren Fair clothes. So
Oh no.
so the thing I thought I did have a different shot of him that showed him square on. Again, we've got the the football shoulders going on, the American football shoulder padding going on, and it's got this very square look on the shoulders, and that's just it's this era is very rounded for men. It's following the natural line of the shoulders because the garments are actually designed, especially for men, so that you can have full range of motion in your garment. So you've got this really deep arm's eye that's tailored into the garment so that as your executioner on the far right of this slide, you can put your arms straight up and nothing resists. There is no garment restriction,
Yeah.
right? And you can see the center one I picked because you can really see if you look at the circular line that cuts really deep down low to his waist. That's the arm's eye of this garment. So
Ah,
it's specifically designed to create this round natural shoulder, but that's actually an accident. It's created so that you get full range of motion. And what this guy's
mm,
wearing, he couldn't lift his arms up for crap if that were a real garment. He's got a modern suit sleeve basically, which modern business suits are designed so that you don't have to do anything. Well, you can't do anything. You can't move your arms if it's actually buttoned. That's why modern people wearing a business suit, they always have to unbutton it to do anything. Like the first thing they do when they arrive at their location is unbutton their suit so they can actually lift their arms, right? Or their jacket.
yeah.
Um,
Mm, 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 mm.
so yeah, there's a lot going on here that's wrong. One, his hair
Yeah.
is very modern U.S. military, um, or other militaries of eras not too far in the past, shall we say, um,
Mm,
that are becoming in vogue again, shall we say? Um,
yeah.
the pattern of his garment is 50 years. That fabric, that's beautiful damask for about 50 or 60 years from now. So that pattern is
Ah.
way too modern for him. This is not how fabrics looked in this era. And I've got some examples of fabrics that should have been included there. So just so you get an idea, this is the general motif of patterned fabric in this era. These are extant pieces from the V&A's collection, by the way, Victoria Albert Museum. You'll see it's much smaller, it's much tighter, it's much busier, and more color. You
Mm,
notice you've got lots of colors. You've got two, three, sometimes four colors woven into these patterns. So this is the style of
mm, mm.
pattern. This is what his looks like. This is from the 1470s. So
1470s. Okay, that's a bit
1470s.
away.
Way too late. Way too late. Way too late. Not
Mm,
even We're not even on this horizon yet of this style of pattern. And these style
yeah.
of patterns come from the East, and that's kind of the way all the patterns work. Like they weave it in China, it gets imported eventually into Europe, and then that becomes the fashion. It gets New thing gets woven in Persia, that eventually gets, imported into Europe, that becomes the fashion. So it takes a little time
Mm,
between the time it's fashionable in the East and it's then fashionable in the West. But yeah. So I mean, it is a medieval pattern, but it is not a 1400 pattern. It's much later. So and these are
yeah,
all
yeah,
extant
yeah. That's
pieces from the V&A's collection. So we're not.
mm,
I'm not making this up. This is what we know because painting. When you look at paintings, paintings can be creative. Even in the Middle Ages, artists were super creative. Just because you see it in a
mm.
painting doesn't mean that's how it was. But that's when I like to go to the archaeology and see what we have. And here too, here is this. This really shows you the grande assiette sleeve. This is an extant garment, an
Mm.
extant cotehardie or pourpoint, actually from the 1360s. So it's a little earlier than that. But if you compare the way this one looks to this garment here, you can see it's very, very, very similar. Even though the picture on the far right is from the 1390s, and this garment is ostensibly dated to the 1360s, still very similar in its construction and
Yeah.
style.
But it
And
seems to me it's the same thing again, where we had a historian
yeah, go ahead.
give I can't remember the exact name of her, the creative designer, all this stuff, and the creative designer was like, "Yeah, that's great, but I'd rather do this." You know, that seems to be the running case in not just Kingdom Come, but a lot of movies as well. So, like, I'd hate to completely attack the creative designer. She was watching this. I'm sorry, but at the same time, I can see slightly where she's going. She definitely is more into the late, kind of much more the late 15th century, the early 16th century, rather than the period itself. And I can see why the criticism is the way it is now, because obviously, as I was saying myself, and this is why I love interviewing Rachel today, I have no clue about any of these clothings. So when I was playing the game, I was like, "Oh, this seems acceptable." But now that you've torn it apart, I'm like, "Oh no!" And but I actually understand now where the creative thought process is going. Definitely more Tudor period,
Yeah, it really is.
or at
Um,
least going into it.
and the nice thing about this extant garment is, there's always the debate. Well, how realistic was medieval art? Did people really dress like that? Did the clothes actually look that way? As you can see, specifically talking about the silhouette, right? This kind of not really hourglass, but maybe chalice shaped, I've heard. You've got this chalice shaped silhouette for men that is the ideal. And if you can see in this garment that was reflected in the clothing. And so you look at this garment and the sort of pigeon shaped chest that dips into a narrow waist, and then it's sort of a wasp waist, and then narrow hips that are fitted to the hips. And then you look here at Hans. That's not even nothing. There is nothing there that reflects that silhouette even a little bit. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
yeah.
it's just wrong all around. And there's no closures. Like, how does he get this tight thing onto himself? There is no way to take
To
it on
just
or
make
put
it
it off.
around them.
Right. I guess he just rips open a seam every night and has someone sew it back together when he puts it on in the morning. I don't know.
Yeah, he's just that much of a wealthy noble.
Right, exactly.
Except for it doesn't explain the scene when he goes out hunting with Henry. If you do it, because there's a side, if you have played the game and stuff, there's actually a side quest where you can go actually drinking with Hans, and you can even try to kind of woo women with Hans and stuff. But there's one particular scene where you can go hunting. So you're right, for him to like go, undress at nighttime while hunting and then wake up the next day with it perfectly on. Yeah, that sounds a bit
I know.
much, to be honest with you, like, especially for the realism. So I think you've just destroyed my role playing.
Uh, so yeah, I'm sorry. That's what I do. I'm a killjoy. It's it's my whole purpose in life is to disillusion
Uh,
people.
but I don't know how I feel now because I did enjoy role playing and was a bit of escapism, but at the same time, I kind of like to know the actual historical facts. So, it's a win, win some, lose some.
Yeah, ignorance is bliss, I guess. But if you're watching this live stream, it's not because you want ignorance. I'm just going to put that out there.
Very
Um,
true.
okay, so the other things that are wrong about him, those pants-like hosen he's wearing, mm-mm, they're going to be much more fitted than that. They're not going to look like pants. They're going to look like what many modern people might think are tights. So I want you to
Mm,
look at the gentleman, the two pictures on the right here. Look at how fitted their hosen are, leg shaping. Um, look at these gentlemen, also from this era with the Grand Assiette, leg shaping hosen. So he's not going to have baggy
mm.
hosen. He just isn't. And that cod piece that he has, you can kind of see there's like this triangle of fabric. No,
No.
that's not in this
Oh
period.
no.
No, he would be wearing split hosen, and I've got a slightly dirty picture of split hosen. If you look at the gentleman in this top right corner here, you can see his hosen are leg fitting, but they've come loose from his braise because he's taken his braise off for whatever reason, or come loose from his coat.
Mm,
It's two separate legs. They are two separate legs, pretty much, pretty much from this in this period, and that's actually a matter of convenience, and that's confusing to a lot of modern people because modern men think, oh well, how can you ride a horse if you don't have pants? Well, um, you wore braise, so these linen like boxer like things went under this, and you just did.
mm,
That's just what happened. Um, so yeah, the hosen aren't right, and they're black. That's not black. Black is such an expensive color in this era, like insanely expensive, because you can
mm,
only achieve it with walnut, uh, excuse me, with either walnut shells or oak gall, and
mm.
it takes a lot of dye stuff to get black. So
Yeah.
there's almost no evidence. I have almost no evidence of black hosen from this era, either visual or documentary. Like the expense accounts, not even the expense accounts. I don't think the expense accounts of Edward III even have black hosen in them. So
Mm.
no color. They like
Um,
color.
Yeah, just so some of my own viewers who've jumped over are not confused here, because in the early medieval period there is a Breton law, and the lowest color is black. But the black in the 15th century and black in the early medieval period are two different blacks.
Yes.
You can get different blacks depending on how you dye it. So in the 15th century, we have the reappearance of a high level black that appears inside the Tudor court and stuff.
Right.
But the black of the early medieval period that slaves would have worn would have been basically, um, Yuki will correct me on this one. I think it's created by the bogs and stuff itself that you can get this blackness that comes out of it. And oh, sorry. if you bury your linen and stuff inside of the bog, it can come out black,
Oh,
and
it
the
rusts.
only people supposed to be
Right.
wearing that is the slaves.
Got it.
It's the lowest of the low. So for anyone that's coming over from my stream, that's like, oh, but black is the lowest of the low. No, that's just for the early medieval period, and that's not. It's people would have known the difference. They would have been able to see the black, the bog slave level, the low level black, and then they would have seen the high level black coming with the Tudors and stuff, and went, "Oh, that's a proper black. I like that black. I wouldn't mind wearing that kind of black."
Well, they
So there is a
also,
difference between the two.
there were also black sheep. So it's entirely possible that in early Ireland they might have been, just using the wool from black sheep, for instance, to make a lower,
Mm,
lower quality. It's not a deep black, but it's, kind of
mm,
blackish. But yeah, there's no bogs in south of kind of Denmark in Europe. So no
mm,
way to create that rust. What would have been a oxidized black, actually. Yeah, so he shouldn't, in this period, in this part of Europe, he should not be wearing black hosen. It's just not a thing. I know it's, sexy
mm,
and powerful, we think now, for a man to be wearing black pants, but he shouldn't be. It
mm,
wasn't
mm.
back then. In this era, the power color was red, which you see on our gentleman here in the middle. Power color is red
Yeah,
because red is
looks much
created.
better.
Yeah, right, exactly. Red is created, the deepest red, crimson red, is created from kermes, which is a louse that lives and feeds off of oak trees. And it's this little red bug,
Mm,
basically, and it creates that amazing red that you see depicted in the picture there in the middle. So that's the power color. Black doesn't come into fashion
mm.
until Charles the Bold decides that black will be the color of his court. And then suddenly in the second half of the 15th century, everyone is wearing black. That's where black really gets its start as a fashion
Ah.
color. Yeah.
So
But,
there's a good chance that the likes going into the Wars of the Roses and stuff that the Fitzgeralds may have had black and stuff, is it?
well, not going into. So by the second, they might have been, they would have started really wearing black clothes and like, and anyone basically from like the 1460s kind of onward.
Oh, 1460s.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, Philip the Good had some black clothing, but Charles the Bold really like made it the color of his court. This court is brought to you by
Mm.
the color black. Um, but they
I
could have. I mean, they absolutely could have. There are certainly, you start seeing black clothing in the textiles, so they could have. By the end of the first half of the 15th century. It's just not a big common thing yet. It's not the thing everyone is doing yet. Color is
It's
still
quite
the name of the
fascinating.
game, basically.
Yeah, be as colorful as possible, which the Irish love.
And this little hood he's wearing, like, I don't know, it doesn't want to be a hood, does it want to be a cowl, is it just a neckerchief? Like, it's not right for this period. So you can see the size of hoods that people are wearing in this era, is more like this if they're
Mm.
wearing a hood. It's not this weird little neckerchief thing that he's got going on. So, and
Yeah,
yeah.
it is interesting the interpretation because I assume actually what's weird. I actually assume that the historian would have given the photo in the middle there of Hans to the creative designer, and the creative designer was like, "Yeah, that's great, but I'm going to do my own thing here."
Yeah.
Because if you look at the original photo, there is like a red thing around his neck there, and that's probably what they were thinking. They were probably like, "Oh well, I'll make this slightly bigger or something." Maybe that's what they were thinking. I don't
It's
really know, to be honest.
Yeah, no, that's a possibility. Unfortunately, that red around his neck there is the red of his doublet, which he's wearing under that overgarment because his hosen
Uh,
lace into that doublet. So
mm,
what you can't see here because it's on the inside, and I'm sorry, I forgot to include the pictures of it on the inside. So this thing is called a pourpoint, which literally means 4 points, because it was to point your hosen to your doublet to keep them up. And also, so
mm,
it was literally this was a support guard. This was an undergarment. What you're seeing here is the thing you wore
mm,
underneath of the nice voluminous overgarment, right? So your hosen were actually tied into this thing. There are actually 5 sets of ties on the inside at about hip level on this garment, to which these hosen like these in the top left corner of the left image would have laced.
mm,
So
mm, mm.
what this is what a later version, so a version with a collar, is what that red garment, that red that you see there, is basically this with a slightly different shape and a collar underneath of that gray overgarment. So yeah, lots of layers. So this, it's like I can't tell what he's wearing underneath of this garment. So I'm not certain. See, it's I can't even tell whether what he's wearing is supposed to be an overgarment or it's supposed to be his doublet. But you've
Yeah.
seen him naked-ish, so I'm assuming probably they don't have him actually wearing a doublet, and then his hosen just magically stay up on their own.
Yeah, that's 100% what happens because when he is running around naked, which happens quite a lot in the game, he's only wearing white underwear. That's it. Like they just have him running about in white underwear. Like all that stuff that you see there, gone. It's just him in a white underwear running around, either in the settlements because he's chasing after women or he's drinking, or outside because he's camping and he just decides he wants to walk around naked. He's one of those sort of men.
Got it. Oh boy. Okay. Yeah. So, uh, let me see. Was there anything else? Oh, so I wasn't certain what social class he was, Hans. So what I found is an image on the right. Is we have um, men at arms who are not necessarily knights, and are probably not knights actually. And so you can kind of see what a non-knightly, how a non-knightly man at arms would have accoutered himself in this era, right around 1400. And the reason I don't think they're actually knights is because they have weapons that knights weren't necessarily using in this era. Also bows and arrows, and also they're not wearing any metal, right? They've got no plate on.
Mm.
But they do have protective, like they have the aventail, which is made of, probably a heavily padded fabric, and they have a helmet but no faceplate. So this is what non-knightly men at arms would have worn. Again, the theme that I want everyone to focus on is color. There was color in medieval clothing, even for men at arms, right?
Yeah.
It's the gray filter that everyone wants to put on medieval games and medieval movies and medieval programming it just wasn't the reality, you know. The,
Yeah, it's creative designers are trying to express the feeling of the Hundred Years' War. The Hundred Years' War now has dragged and dragged and dragged. And even in Bohemia, you have, obviously Rachel will add on to this because you know much more than I do, but you have people, men of Bohemia, going over as mercenaries, over to fight in the Hundred Years' War, and then coming back, and it's trying to have the feeling of the impact of the Hundred Years' War, and then the aftermath of the Black Death. So when a lot of these creative designers are trying to express this emotion and feeling, it's always black, dreary, depressive. I don't think Kingdom Come is the worst one for it. There is far more worse, and even in the movies
yeah,
themselves, they will put a black filter on just to express the emotion of 100 years, the Black Death,
yeah,
look at these, and even the dirt, like people will go around in the dirtiest clothes and everything from that period and stuff. And it goes completely against the literature that we have of the time, where people are trying to be as colorful as possible. Like, even from my perspective of Irish, in because the early Irish laws would have been brought back at this period, because the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers would have taken control of the Parliament away from the King of England.
right.
We're going into the period now of Richard II, his failed reign in Ireland. And so the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds would have wrestled that control back. They would have had in Ireland, if they were following the laws correctly, which they should have, a very colourful Ireland where people are trying to put on as much colours as possible, especially now that the Fitzgeralds have that good trade link with Florence to bring in all of that nice wool and silk and so on and so forth into the realm. Definitely from my perspective, it definitely is colourful even in Ireland, which once again is meant to be backwards and, grey and dreary
Right.
and,
Yeah, it's yeah, I think, to me, what people I think a lot of people don't realize is that, especially in the pre-modern world where color equals wealth, because you need more dye stuff, which is very expensive, and you need more over dyes and repeated dyeing of fabric to attain deep colors. So color equals
Mm.
power, color equals wealth, and and humans have always liked colors until very recently. For the most part, humans are attracted to colors. We've evolved for it. So because color is a sign of health and all sorts of biological realities. So for me, it's important that if you're depicting something in the medieval era, you use the right colors because colors were part of an integral part of the psychology of the era and the social
Mm.
interactions of the era. So to just put a gray filter over it, or God forbid, do all browns and grays means you don't actually. That's not the Middle Ages. Like,
Yeah.
you can. In my view, it's actually more horrifying if you have these people dressed in these beautiful, bright clothes and they're committing these atrocities because you don't expect it,
Mm.
right? That makes it more unexpected.
Yeah.
You expect someone who looks like a villain to act like a villain. You don't expect someone who looks like a god to act like a villain. So that's
Well,
that's my
now
take.
you're trying to be too intelligent.
I know, I know. There I go. I need to shut up and just talk about clothes. Okay.
Yeah.
um,
Because like the thing is that majority of people when they get into these programs and stuff, they kind of want it all to be breastfed to them. They don't want to think.
yeah, so true. So
Mm.
I picked this image because it depicts people of various social statuses in and around the sort of Germany, Bohemia, in and around like 14. I think this one was 1405, but still. So you can see different classes of people, how they're all kind of wearing hoods, and they've got this kind of sort of vaguely form fitting but not too tightly fitting overgarment, and their hosen are colored, and you can see the different kind of shoes that they're wearing. And this is kind of this is middle classes mostly, not the. It's very hard to find early, sort of pre Renaissance depictions of middle class people, because they're usually not very
Mm.
interesting to stories and artists. But here we've got one, and I just wanted so people get an idea of the silhouette that is appropriate for middle, even lower class people in this era. And this is definitely not what I've been seeing from the stills from this video. So yeah, but what this also shows is a downtown, and a downtown where there's a market happening. What I found interesting about this were the tents, the temporary stands that have been set up in the in the upper right and upper left corners. So you can actually see how stalls are set up if you're a merchant at a fair or a tavern keeper, someone selling food at a fair. These are the kind of stalls that you would have seen in a town scene. So I don't know. I'm assuming somewhere in this game, you go into a town and there's a fair or a market or something. This is what it should look like. um,
Mm.
I doubt
Much
it.
more exciting, colorful.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, less, less like a bomb has been dropped. Okay,
Yeah.
let's see. Moving on to Sir
Oh
Esteban.
yes.
Oh my
The
God.
betrayer of the village that Henry is from. He's one of the nobles in the village. He ends up selling out to Sigurd as he marches into
Sigurd or
Bohemia.
Sigismund?
Sorry?
Sigismund? You mean the king of Hungary?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm
Sigismund.
sorry. I slipped
That's okay.
over that. Sorry about that.
Got it. So he's obviously a knight. Do we know anything
Hmm.
about him other than that he's a knight?
He is meant to be, give us here, he is the one who, so he works for Radzig, Radzig is the noble of the area that Henry is from, and he works for him. He's one of the main organizers in that area and stuff. And he basically organizes the raid with the new Sigismund
Mm.
who comes into the area and stuff. So he's meant to be loyal to Radzig. He betrays him completely, sells him out over to Sigmundson, and so because of that, Henry just hates him.
As he
So
should.
although Henry's just the son of a blacksmith, he's not. Yeah, yeah, he's not a big fan of this character. So this character is portrayed as the villain in this story. And so a few years back, when I was doing my own reading into the history and stuff, I just found it quite interesting that in other interpretations that Sigmund is in fact, seen as a good guy in a lot of different interpretations. And this guy obviously would have been seen in a positive light given your interpretation. But in the video game and a lot of Bohemians, he's considered the bad guy of the game. He's the noble that betrays everybody and sells out to Sigmundson.
Got it. Okay,
Mm.
well, I know then why they chose this color scheme because baddies need to be dressed in black, obviously.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
the silhouette here is just again completely wrong. It's that American football player shoulder look again. So this
Yeah.
takes us back to this is the silhouette he should have, not
Mm.
Mr. Square Shoulders. Or I've included another padded coat. Um, this, if he's going to wear a cloth padded garment, which I think is what they're going for there, this is from the 1370s, but it still should be similar to this, very very similar to this, and it should have this shoulder slope or this shoulder slope. What I
Mm.
do like is they obviously the designer did try to capture the padding that curves around his body, his torso that way around the
Mm.
arm's eye. You can see that sort of here in the Grand Assiette. Um, but yeah, he no, just just no. And those giant buckles, my God, what's going on there? Why does he have buckles? He doesn't
Mm.
need buckles. They have buttons. That's why buttons were invented as closures.
Mm.
You don't need buckles on a padded cloth garment like that. You just, or even
Mm.
if it's padded, even if it's cloth armor, buttons are still what gets used. Um, it just the short sleeves. I don't know what's going on with those short sleeves. That's not. If he tried technically the way those arms eyes are, they're so modern business suit. They come out so far on the point of his shoulder, or even almost off the point of his shoulder, that if he actually tried to raise
Mm.
his arms, he wouldn't be able to because of how tight that it is in his body. He would get like this far.
Yeah.
It's it's not it's completely unrealistic. I'm confident that in the game they just illustrate him lifting his arms and it's fine, but he wouldn't be able to in that
Yeah.
garment.
Because he's not even in the game for very long. I've seen him at the very start of the game, and that's it. And then he's just a great betrayer after that because the game's kind of set from Henry's perspective. So he's only at the very start of the game, and you can, as you pointed out, he's the bad guy. That's it. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
that and now to be honest with you, I didn't see him long enough to notice all these little details and stuff. And now that you pointed out, it's like, yeah, why didn't I see that sooner? Because it's actually horrendous when you actually take a good look at it. Like it
yeah,
really does point out that maybe he's meant to be the kind of American football villain,
right.
that's there to bully the good nerd. Maybe that's the type of character that they're trying to kind of express with their creativeness.
I'm 100% confident that's what they were going for, but it's not, that's fine for fantasy, but if you're actually trying to do a game based on real history and potentially people who actually lived in this era, it's not it's not don't if those of you who are watching, do not make your 1400 era garments based on this gentleman. It will be wrong. Just
Mm.
not correct at all. And then what's going on with those sleeves, like he's got some kind of, I don't know, band that's holding the sleeves on. He wouldn't be able to get his hands through those arms openings unless there's buttons, but they just didn't, that wasn't what shirts were like in this era. Also, shirts were white,
Mm.
so I'm not certain what
Mm.
that thing is supposed to be. If it's supposed to be a shirt, it's not, it needs to be white because that's just, they were white, they were linen, you could launder the hell out of it.
I
Um,
noticed as well, he's got those weird straps on, and I noticed that when people are trying to portray Vikings as well, that they always put those weird stripes on as well. And I've never found, and this is me personally, and I'm for correction on this, in the early medieval period, I've never found those straps. So why do those straps keep reappearing all over the place? Is there actually a find on that,
I
or
I
what's the
have
crack like?
I have never, so I've never seen a padded garment with straps, the extant ones. All the extant
Yeah.
padded garments I've seen have buttons or lacing, mostly buttons,
Hmm.
but sometimes lacing, mostly buttons, but never, never buckles, and certainly not awkward, bulky, riveted button uh, buckles like that. Buckles in the medieval period are meant to be decorative, and I've got some pictures of actual buckles that will go through, and you can actually see what how the shape a buckle should have been in this era, and it should have been ornamental. I mean, functional but also ornamental. Like these look like just straight up
Hmm.
modern steel buckles with a little rolly thing on to help you get the strap in and out. That didn't exist in the Middle Ages. Yeah.
Hmm.
I'm also not certain how exactly his sword is really suspended there because he's not wearing a sword belt. So it just magically
Magic
hangs to his
gimmick.
hips in that jaunty
It's
angle.
so Yeah, it's so funny because there's other people, and when they get it historically right, it makes sense. But when you give it to the creative creators, they kind of don't like logic kind of goes out the window with them. Now that I'm actually looking at it from your perspective, like, you know.
Like I don't, yeah. That does that just float along with him? It's a magic sword, maybe. I mean, they
It
have
is.
those.
That's what it does exactly what it's doing. Like, yeah, it is. It is. And it's the same thing when they put the sword in the back in the video games,
Oh,
and they don't think about the reality of it. It hovers on the back. Like, because there's a running joke that the character has a magnet on his back. So when they're trying to take the sword out, and also on top of that, because it's in The Witcher, this problem pops up in The Witcher, the video
oh
game,
God.
which is based off medieval Poland, where the main protagonist, who's goes into villages and he's trying to fix their folklore problems and stuff,
Right.
he takes the sword from the back. And it makes no sense because it would get stuck here and it would and also there's nothing to hold it so it's magnets so he's got magnets in his
Magnet.
back in the 15th century and he's able to do something with his limbs where he's able to take the sword out
Oh my God.
complete magic and we assume this is probably what's going on here with the creative lot that they thought right we'll just put the magnet on the back because magnets exist in the 15th century don't they do don't they
Yeah, I mean, they've figured out that certain rocks are magnetic. I'm not certain how much they've refined them in that way. I, yeah, I mean, I think alchemists are
Squash.
playing with it, but
Yeah,
I don't think it's become a commonly accessible. You can't just go down to the marketplace to the magnet seller, I guess is what I'm saying.
yeah. That's exactly what happened here. That's the explanation. The magnet seller down in the trade area. That's it. That's it. That's
Oh
exactly it.
God. And the armor, the leg armor, oh, it's not really right
Yeah.
for this era. It's no, especially if he's a knight.
The
This guy's
football,
a knight,
literally, the
right?
moment you pointed it out to me that he's meant to be the football bully, yeah, that's exactly what they went for. They literally saw a picture. So where all the other characters are based off of characters from the Tudor period in Ireland, these characters all seem to be, well, this character seems to be based off a football player. That's exactly who he's supposed to be.
Yep.
You
And
know,
he,
the
ugh,
one of the teen movies.
right?
Mhm.
But he's on the bad side, right? He's on the
Even,
opposite football team, the
yeah,
evil
even
football team.
like
Yeah.
that's exactly it. Like yeah, now I can't get rid of it. I actually can't get that image out of my head. The
Oh wait,
moment
but
you hit the nail on the
now I
head,
want
boom,
you to
yeah,
imagine one of those like 1920 or 1930s, 40s, 50s style American football helmets, the leather ones. That
yeah.
that's what he should be wearing, and then the picture is complete, and all he needs is that roughly
Just
shaped football.
stop. If they don't finish the, if they don't actually do what the fans want, which is to be more historically accurate, that's how you'll probably appear in the second game.
Oh my
Stand by for part two on
god.
this.
Oh my god. So
Yeah,
his shoes are not bad, actually. Trying to also focus on
really.
things that are mostly correct. They're turn shoes. You can tell they don't really have they don't have a thick modern sole. Um,
Mm,
I have seen some extant shoes that had the decorative stitching. If you look closely, you can see there's decorative stitching around the opening, going up around the area around his calf and coming back down. Mid calf boots are absolutely a thing in this era, so that's fine. Um, Shoes with different kinds of straps to tighten them in different ways are also a going concern in this era. So you see he's got like buckles over the foot, and then there's like lacing closing it up, going up the front up to the mid calf area. I've seen all of those closure styles in extant shoes, so it's actually not bad. I have to say I was
mm,
pleasantly surprised by the footwear in these stills because I was
mm.
expecting much worse.
Yeah, well, the way you've just torn it apart, my entire role playing ruined.
Sorry,
Yeah, I was
goal
actually
achieved.
expecting you just to completely rip that apart there.
And just for reference, the bottom right or bottom left picture on this slide is a sketch, very faithful and accurate archaeological sketch of an extant shoe that was found, that was
Mm,
excavated from Central Europe dated to the end of the 14th century. So it's closes with two buckles. It has a side opening instead of front opening, but that's okay. I've seen side open or front openings as well. So I just wanted to not always be poo-pooing, but also praising where praise is due. Yeah. But
Mm,
again,
mm,
the
mm,
silhouette
mm.
is completely wrong. He's got this very square shaped chest, and the, if you look again at these garments, the picture of the little gentleman in the sculpture on the top left there, you can see the really pigeon chest, the narrow waist is really the emphasis of the silhouette in this era. And no, it's not necessarily that they were, twerking their skeletons to look like that by wearing, shaping corsets or something like that. You can pad the garment and tailor the garment to
Mm.
just have, to give you that pigeon chest without it reshaping your body for you. So that's that's what's normally going on. This gentleman apparently can't afford a good tailor, I guess. Yeah.
He's meant to be a noble.
Right, exactly. And again, he's in black, and I guess it's supposed to be leather, maybe. I'm not certain.
Yeah,
Um, they just, they just,
I'm gonna say it probably is leather. Like,
and
yeah,
black
because it doesn't
leather.
look like a proper cabin.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I just, again, leather garments are not as common as people think they were in the Middle Ages. Leather was mostly used for harness and shoes, for really heavy duty, heavy wear items, because leather was, I don't know why, but people think peasants wore leather. Leather's expensive, buddy. Um, you,
Mm,
you can't just, peasants, it wasn't like they could just make their own leather. You don't just kill an animal and put its skin on and it's leather. Um,
yeah.
so, I actually, there are some extant shoes from this era that probably belong to a lower class person, because they've actually been cobbled together from like 8 pieces of leather, little pieces of leather, to give them enough leather to actually
Mm,
make a shoe for themselves. So that kind of shows that leather was expensive. It was hard to produce. It was stinky to produce, and there's very little evidence of, it's not that leather garments didn't exist. They're not common in the records, right? And they tend to be a
mm,
specialty
mm.
item, and it's just not as common as people think it was. So if you want to do what the common thing is in the medieval period, you're going to use fabric, even for your arming garments, because
Mm.
it's colorful, it's bright, and it's even more conspicuous consumption than leather would be. But certainly, lower class people are
Yeah.
not wearing lots of leather. It's just not happening.
But it seems to me that it's exactly the same thing that we keep appearing, that we can literally, as you pointed out here, we can see the historical side, that we can actually see the historian giving it over to
Yeah.
the creative law, and the creative law just going, actually, this is the story we want to tell, and just throwing all their stuff in the bin, which I think for the people they advertised this game to, now I understand why people were so angry, because, like, as I was saying before, for like the King of Bohemia is not my specialty. I didn't really know why people were so mad. I could see the little bit of flaws, but now I understand why the likes of the creative Contessa and everyone else, now that you're explaining this to me, we're actually so angry about the clothing in this game, because it's the biggest critique, because it's the game is so good. It's a really good game. But now I'm like, okay, now I understand why people were hacking in and modding the game and changing it and stuff. Now it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and actually, I was looking, just looking for some more pictures in case I found something that was like a better angle. And it's funny, I actually came across websites where it was, look, you can access this mod, just download here. And I was like, oh, I see.
Yes, yes. The modding scene in both, was it Kingdom Come, Medieval 2, Mountain Blade. They seen the original, what the creators have given to them, and went, "Yeah, this is terrible. We hate this because you're trying to give this game to us, and we're the biggest critiques ever." And I don't want to sound too bad, but when people are arguing and stuff, I'm quite ignorant. That's why I'd love to get on and talk to likes of Rachel and stuff, and other people within our community, and ask, okay, why are we so angry here, and ask the questions. Because it is serious. Like, this game is meant to be actually sold to us, so it's like these little fixes just make it a little bit better. Like, so I think overall our thing is to try to make the game better, not worse,
Yeah, no,
because we're
exactly.
passionate about all the subject. Mm,
It's so the problem, people say, well, what does it matter what they're wearing? Well, for those of us who know what things should look like in this era, the immersion is broken
mm.
when they don't.
Yeah,
Right, and that it's a
that's it.
role playing game, as you say. So the whole purpose of role playing is escapism, right? That's it, is to,
It's
and if you don't know, then anything that's different from the modern world is escapist. But if you do
Mm.
know and it's not right, then it's no longer escapist and you're just constantly jarred. So, I mean,
Yeah.
ignorance is bliss, I guess, is actually probably true.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I understand where the creative team are coming from because they're trying to express a feeling and an emotion. So when the player comes to, so and so, they get that, feeling and emotion straight away. Like for here, you've got that bullying jock kind of character, and that's kind of what they want to express. But I feel you can still do that with the clothing of that period. You just need to build a much more healthy relationship with the historical team that's there because there are other people that have managed to pull this off where they have a much more healthier relationship. And we know that Kingdom Come 2 have promised that they will build much
Right.
more of a healthy relationship with the historical team going into the second game. So hopefully we can, when we're critiquing the second game, which we look forward to doing, we'll find less mistakes like this, hopefully.
Here's hoping. My toes are crossed too. Yeah. So one last critique is this gentleman's hat, headwear. Now, one, I love that they put lots of these characters in headwear because that's a big problem. A lot of modern people don't like hats, and so they tend to exclude headwear. That's one of my complaints about Hans actually, and his military haircut and his non-hat wearing self. The only problem with this hat is that it's 50 years too early. So the
Mm.
kind of hat he's wearing is like the Lorenzo de Medici caput a
Uh,
chaperone. So this is when the hood, it's no longer a separate hood that they're rolling up. It's kind of fossilized into a padded ring of cloth with a drapey bit that
mm,
simulates what used to be the rolled up hood. So this is actually too early. That hasn't happened yet. So it's
mm,
yeah, it's an anachronism, but I'm not, it's not a horrible anachronism like many of the other things that are depicted in this image. It's just for those of you who might
mm.
be looking to this for inspiration for your 1400 circa 1400 kit, that's not the right headgear. And I've got a whole slide on headgear options and we'll get to that towards the end. Okay. Sigismund.
Ah. So are we going to tear him apart, or is he the A-OK? Because
Oh
we
no,
we see him for a small glimpse in the game.
we're tearing him apart because just because, yeah, because I want
No.
to talk about noblemen's clothing in general. Yeah, Sigismund. Mm. I mean, he's not. It's not. I've seen worse. Okay, so let me just
Mm.
preface it with I have seen worse. So Sigismund is, we discussed this. He's he's the king of various polities in Central Europe, depending on the decade that you're talking about. And he eventually becomes the Holy Roman Emperor, and he's participating in these wars because of 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 that position. And in fact, did you read about what he did to Jan Hus?
No, oh, I know he gets cooked. I know Jon Hus gets cooked. I know he gets tricked into the court and then cooked.
He does,
What
yes.
happens in between? I'm not quite sure.
No, well, that's just it. Sigismund gives him safe conduct to come and attend the Council of Constance. He says, if you attend
Mm.
this, we will discuss your complaints and we will take them into consideration. I grant you safe conduct. And then as soon as Jan Hus was there, he was arrested and then burnt at the stake. So Sigismund is
Ooh.
not a good guy. he's he's
Yeah, so I understand now why the Bohemians see him as the villain, the modern day Czech Republic.
because he's not Czech, right? He's not a native Czech.
Mm.
He's from the House of Luxembourg. Um, his I mean, his father is from the House of Luxembourg. His mother is not Czech either. I forget where she comes. She's not. She's they are a foreign family, right? So you start
Mm.
off with
Mm.
that, and then Jan Hus is super popular in Bohemia with the people, right? Because he's preaching about power to the people,
Ah.
amongst other things.
Mm.
So Sigismund betrays him and then burns him at the stake. So he burns their folk hero at the stake, which, do you think that actually changes anyone's minds about anything?
Yeah, that's going to cause problems in the future, all right.
Yeah. So Jan Hus dies in like 1414 or something like that, and this conflict continues
Mm.
on to like 1434.
Mm.
So anyway, here is Sigismund wearing his conquistador breastplate. Um, Again, this is not the silhouette that this. I mean, this breastplate. This is the silhouette it should have. That's the shape his breastplate should have. It should not look like that.
Mm.
It just
Yeah.
this looks like such fantasy sports armor or like LARP sports armor to me. Um, in
Mm.
so many ways. Yeah, the helmet is okay. Actually, the helmet is not bad.
Yeah, I was just thinking that
He's
because
not
it
wearing a
reminds me
faceplate,
of
but
the
actually the helmet is fine.
mm.
Ironically, except except what the hell? Okay, okay. So you know with these studs, you see the studs around in the helmet, the studs that go around what would be the neck and face opening.
Hmm.
What you know what those studs are for, right?
Oh, is it to protect the armor as the sword comes in or something?
No, you hang an aventail from that. A male aventail gets laced into that. That's
Oh,
your
right.
that's your neck
Mm.
protection. It's not decorative. And here on Sigismund, they're just decorative.
Oh, the Averntail. Sorry, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he has no. He instead he's got a standard, but his helmet is designed for an aventail. So,
Mm.
yeah, that's fantasy right there. And
Mm.
not wearing his faceplate. If this is I don't know what
Well,
this still
he
is
was
from.
to be fair, he was giving a speech at that scene,
Oh,
so
okay.
maybe it was a
Okay,
good idea not to wear his face.
that's maybe okay then. But I don't know what's going on with the clothing under his at his waist here on the horse. Like
Mm.
I have no idea what any of that is, but it's not correct for the medieval period. Again, he should be wearing a garment that is much more similar to this as his like arming garment, and then his armor will actually point to it, right? Um,
Mm. Mm.
so he'll actually lace his armor onto the arms of this garment, for instance. So I mean, it's not exactly it's a little bit changed, but it's still very similar. And there's not going to be any weird bulky fabric. I'm not certain if that's supposed to be a sash or something. Sashes are not a thing in this era, in this part of the world.
Oh, really?
No, no.
Mm.
Belts are practical. Sashes are not practical for
Mm.
battle. They just aren't. So what I have here in the middle is actually a from life portrait by Pisanello, great 15th century
Yeah.
Italian portraitist of Sigismund in the early 1430s. So it's about 30 years later, but I just wanted to provide an actual picture of him, just as a frame of reference. Um, you know, uh, his hair in this is it's interesting that they've got him in Shirley Temple curls is a strange choice in the left hand picture. I don't know what that's about.
Mm.
The circlet, I don't know that men weren't wearing circlets in this era, so I'm not certain why he is. The metal band
Mm.
around his
Mm.
head, that's women are, but men,
Oh.
that's like that's a much earlier, much centuries earlier head style of head decoration for men. If he's going to wear a crown, he's going to wear a crown. He's not going to wear a circlet. So I'm not
Mm. Mm.
certain what that's about. And again, we've got the footballer shoulder things, which it doesn't look like he's actually wearing any armor in the picture on the left. Sorry, picture on the left. It doesn't look like he's actually wearing armor. So I don't know why in God's
Mm.
name it looks like he's got shoulder pads from the hellish 1980s. Because
Mm.
again, I'm going to keep harping on this. This is the shoulder look. It should follow that kind of slope, right? He shouldn't have big puffy anything. This is not the puffy sleeves era. So I don't. That's not correct. And also that the overgarment is it's weird. So if you look, he's got this short sleeved overgarment that's a little
Mm.
bit full and has some pleats, but it's in this era it's either you have a really full garment and it's got lots of pleats, a la this. Look to the right. This is
Mm.
actually a
That
grave
looks
garment
like
from
correct.
1397 from Prague.
Mm.
So it's either really full or it's not. You can see in these overgarments. You actually got a
Ah.
side by side here, right? So you've got fitted overgarment in the gentleman on the left with the red, and right next to him, the gentleman with
Mhm.
the long green garment. It's really full, but like this thing that Sigismund wearing is neither of those. It's this
Mm,
unhappy medium ground that just didn't exist in this era. It was that would have not have been a fashionable
yeah.
silhouette. The short sleeves, no, just no. And I,
Ah,
they're probably basing that on like um, Edward the Third's jupon, which is, was suspended for centuries over his grave
mm,
as part of his
yeah.
funerary achievement. But this is not a padded garment that he's wearing. The one in,
Yeah.
this is not an
Because
army garment. Yeah.
Yeah, because I see I've seen reenactors, not probably from the best of groups, but I have seen terrible reenactors pop up with that one as well, and a few Viking TV shows and stuff. So yeah, it's the same problem in early medieval period. Once again, where I was talking about earlier with the straps. Once again, people go around with t-shirts and stuff on, and it's like it's not really the fashion, especially in medieval Ireland, where it's bloody freezing all the time.
Yeah, yeah, it just isn't. The color he's wearing looks more late 15th century to me than 1400. Um, the button-up collar that he's got. So it just occurred to me. I think I know what they based this on. They based
Oh,
this
go on.
on, sort of anyway. They based it, I'm pretty certain, on some later 15th century portraits of Hungarian or even Bulgarian kings, because they're wearing
Ah,
more of a hybrid combination of the Western European doublet combined with the Eastern kaftan. And so you get this
mm.
kind of, or like Wallachian, like Vlad the Impaler, like Wallachian rulers. So I think that's probably what they're basing this on, but that wouldn't be right for Sigismund. He was not Hungarian.
Mm.
I've never found any reference to him wearing traditional or Hungarian styles. He was from
Mm.
the House of Luxembourg, and he was an international player. So but also that's not 1400. What I'm describing is actually still later 15th century. But I think that's probably what I wish I'd thought of that earlier. Would have found that picture to show you where I think they got this from. Yeah. So Shirley Temple
Yeah, it seems to be the
curls,
same problem.
early medieval circlet, footballer shoulders, garment that's neither full nor fitted. It's just it's it's not on. So this is again,
Yeah.
this is how Sigismund would have dressed. And if we want to look for arming garments, um, uh, right. So here's some other images of how noblemen and upper class noblemen were dressing in Bohemia in about this era, right? So this actually dates to about
Mm.
1410, but it's still
Mm.
giving you the right idea, and it is actually a Bohemian manuscript. It was done by a Bohemian illuminator. This is actually, though, depicting an Englishman, John Manderley, on his voyage to Asia.
Ah.
I don't know if you ever read any of his travel vlogs. He was the first person to get to Korea,
Oh,
I think. First
oh
European.
wow, it's
Yeah,
quite fascinating.
I think.
'Cause I think this is coming up to the time as well that the Irish are starting to go into China as well. It's not really documented on the Chinese side because he's just another European, but on the Irish side, we're starting to get documents and stuff of Irish people finally making it over in China and stuff. So it's quite interesting that we're also getting the same thing with the English making it over to Korean stuff. That's absolutely magnificent. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
we seem
so
to be getting the same problems again, where it's people. We have a historical team that are quite passionate about the early 15th century, and yet we have a creative team that's more passionate about the late 15th century. So it's the same problems reoccurring again and again.
right. Yeah, there's and it wasn't. I didn't have to look very hard to find these images. I went to the Web Gallery of Art and looked up Bohemian
Yeah,
art from this era, and it pulled it right up. It wasn't hard. Some things I have to dig long and hard for, and I can understand if your average, designer can't find them. On the other hand, you said they actually worked with historians, so
yeah. So what happened when they were interviewing them and stuff? It seems to be a case of they had the historians finished the work, and then they handed it over to the creative team, and the creative team said at the time that they wanted to express themselves, and this is the exact same. It was at the same time that and get this the name for this. The Assassin's Creed Valhalla game came out, where it was the same team again, where you had Assassin's Creed Valhalla was even worse. The creative team had spent, sorry, no, the historical team had spent years prepping them, putting the work together and stuff. And the creative team turned around and says, "No, we don't want any of this. This would not work. This would not sell." And so they put in all the, the Viking LARP clothing of
Yeah,
instead of having a proper cloak. They
yeah.
switched it over to wool. Instead of having the proper tunic, they switched it over to leather, biker leather. And last but not least, they switched up all the helmets and everything. So everything was just the historical team. I think they spent around a good 5 or 6 years putting together all this stuff, information for them, and they were just like, "Sorry, this wouldn't sell," and they switched over to the biker stuff, which did sell for the audience they were aiming for, which was more kind of in the Vikings are, amazing kind of crew. So it did sell for them, but it broke my heart to look at it because it was the same with the Viking television show
Yeah. Oh,
that
that was
they
so
had.
bad.
What?
Tattoos and makeup. Oh
Yeah,
my God.
they had living historians. It was my friends over in Fingod actually said that they would work for them because they were already working at them for the time, and they said they would bring in their clothing and stuff for them, and there's like, no, no, that wouldn't sell, and instead they switched over to biker kit instead because the ratings went up with the biker stuff. So
Of
it's like,
course they did.
what can you do?
Yeah, that is the era in which we live, sadly. It's
Mm,
but we're better than that, and we
yes.
we we know what it should be for our various respective areas, and yeah, this is, so these images really show again the silhouette, the shapes that clothing should have. You've got full skirts, you've got full sleeves, you've got, there's, you can actually see all sorts of different kinds of headwear depicted in this imagery. Now, I want to caveat all art, especially medieval art, as follows. Um, you 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 have to know what the art is depicting, because what it is depicting may influence how the clothing is depicted. So just because it was painted or drawn and painted in 1400 doesn't necessarily mean it is 100% faithful to clothes people were wearing in 1400, because artists were creative. So were just as likely back then to add their own imaginative elements of fantasy to signal to the reader, the viewer, the audience, that this is not Sigismund, this is John Manderley, an English knight who traveled
Mm,
200 years ago to foreign lands. So
mm,
just
mm,
always keep that in mind when you're looking at art, that, you know, in this era, it will have the silhouette, but the details, like the
mm,
ornamental details, might be different. Yeah. So, but still, the silhouette is absolutely correct on all of these. You've got the pigeon chest, the narrow hips. You have the cowls, the hooded cowls, and you can see the armor too in the bottom right. You've got some
mm.
knights, and you've got some travelers, and you have the knights, because John was a knight, and he's traveling out there on his ship and that sort of thing. So
Mm.
that's how Sigismund should look.
But
that's
isn't.
that's the shape he should have, versus, again, evil football player.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, going back to the same thing. Evil football player. Yeah, it's the same running teams, the creative team constantly, where they're getting a hold of the stuff, going, it's not for us, and then switching it over. Yeah, that's quite interesting that you found this because I never noticed all this stuff before, Rachel, to be honest with you.
Well, now you'll never unsee it. You're welcome.
Yeah, I'll have to mod the game now. Thank you.
So just to give you a more idea of Bohemian Night in this era. So this is one of the few
Mm,
stained glass pieces that survived from what would have been Bohemia back then. And this is actually depicting King Arthur and Constantine, I think, but their kit is really solidly 1400, including the overgarments. So,
mm,
this is how knights would have. You can see the full plate armor, you can see the sabatons, you can see the helmet. The helmet has some details that indicate to the viewer that this is King Arthur, great legendary king, not, our current king, but the shape is still right. And these are the kind of, overgarments they wore over top of their armor frequently while fighting, because, you want to be splendid
mm,
when you go and slaughter all the peasants who are supporting Jan Hus. It's just what you do.
mm.
Um, yeah. Oh, shoes. So I think that was. Oh, yeah. Okay. Let's uh let's get on to before we get on, just show you
Just a
this
quick
is.
question of
Oh,
almost
question.
pointing out
Yeah.
the historical inaccuracy with the Vikings Valhalla that they used the girl's name for the protagonist at the start of it. Yeah, there's just even with the names and stuff of Vikings Valhalla, absolutely diabolical, and it's so frustrating because I had a lot of friends because at the time when both Viking Valhalla came out and the Viking television show, I had a lot of connections with both the creative, what was it, the historical team with both Viking Valhalla and what was it, the Viking television show, and it would be a thing of they would spend years doing loads and loads of work, and then being told politely
Can't
that,
touch.
oh, we're actually going to go this direction because we need to make the money. And the problem is that it, don't get me wrong, when it came down to the Vikings, people wanted to see more of a fantasy Viking of the biker type rather than an actual historical Viking
Yeah.
of the time, which, majority of them were peasants and that would have dressed of the peasant sort. Like the closest one you would have had would have been the Hiberno Scandinavians in Dublin, who were professional Vikings who would have gone out and raided professionally,
Right.
but they would have been kind of a mix between Irish dress and Scandinavian dress. But that's not what they wanted to depict. They wanted
No,
the classic savage
they
Scandinavian.
did. They
So yeah, it's very frustrating.
like
But
fight,
at the
like
same time,
biker
it did
Viking to the
sell.
win.
Yeah, sadly. And I do wonder if that's the case, is that the team probably felt at the time when they were putting together Kingdom Come, it was a case of, now, especially now that Rachel has pointed out, that the team, they had gotten all this historical work, which was spent hours putting together, and then the team turned around and says, that's great, but this looks much better, and plus we can express ourselves more.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what happened. Not as bad as the biker look in Vikings Valhalla and the Viking television show, but quite
Yeah,
bad.
you're right. At least there's color. I mean, I have to give
Yeah.
credit where credit's due. We have seen some slightly somber colors or somber-fied colors, but still,
Mm.
um, yeah. So I wanted just to, because shoes are always an interesting topic. So the kind of shoes that Sigismund would have worn as fashion shoes would have been this. These are
Yeah.
the long pikes. But you know what I found? Apparently, that when the knights were in Nicopolis on that crusade that you mentioned, Sigismund as well, they apparently their shoes had like, and I'm not exaggerating, the source I found said 2 foot long pikes. The pike is the point, and they had to cut them off because they couldn't fight properly in them. So,
Yeah, I would think so.
yeah, right. But apparently that's now what 2 feet was in that source might not be our 2 feet, but it's still pretty long. Um,
Just to be frank here, because you have nobles that are running. Maybe you can correct me on this, man. Maybe the peasants, well, the lower classes, weren't wearing these shoes as they
no,
went into
definitely
formation and
not.
went up and down. But you can imagine being a noble. You run into formation to do whatever jobs you need to get done, and straight away a peasant's going to step on that, you
Yep.
know. And I know the noble will be like pushing him, knocking him out of the way and stuff. But that must be getting annoying because I could just imagine every peasant as they're moving into formation to get into their fighting and stuff, then pulling back, just all the stepping onto the foot. No, no, I even common sense would say that. I don't know what they were thinking that day, to be honest with you.
It's ridiculous. But what's really fun about this extant pair is you can see they actually still had the stuffing moss. They actually stuffed the tips
Mm,
with moss to keep them from keep them in shape. I actually read that in
mm.
this era there is an alarming increase in the rate of bunions amongst male skeletons. So,
Yeah, no shock.
yeah, right. So they were actually men, not women, because these days it's a lot of women who give themselves bunions with the narrow high-heeled shoes. Nope, in this era it was the
Mm,
men doing it to themselves. But you can see in the picture,
yeah.
you see these long pikes reflected, and this is from what would now be Eastern Germany. This image, and that's a king. But you can see the
Mm.
peasants in the lower, the laborers in the lower part are that they don't have those ridiculously long pikes, right? So I think the thing that a lot of people forget about knights in this era is they're not often engaging in foot combat. At least they don't start that way for the most part. For the most part, they start on horseback, where you can get away with 2 foot pikes. That's no problem. But the second you're unhorsed, it becomes a problem.
uh, I everywhere in the battlefield, because these are upper class people, they straight away have to get into situations where they're trying to control what's going on. And I could just imagine with the chaos of people trying to move around, and also, as I said, they're moving forward in the formation, moving back in the formation, just stepping straight away. Because when you're pulling back, you can't really see what's behind you. So you can imagine a noble just coming into direction,
Yep.
and although the noble will be slightly behind them, that does feet no way.
Nope.
Just
Nope.
common sense out the window. Like.
And hence why the knights at Nicopolis cut their pikes off. Among them, no doubt,
Yeah.
Sigismund. Um,
Yes. Yeah, I'm not shocked they lost.
no one should be. Oh, just wanted to some more shapes for Sigismund and his ilk. Also, this transition segue into our one lady,
Oh
Teresa.
yes. Patricia.
Segueing into
Uh,
Teresa. So here, these are miniatures, marginalia, and initials from Wenceslaus's Bible, which was calligraphed and illuminated in the 1390s. So very, very, like very close to our period. Wenceslaus was Sigismund's father and is currently, at this time, king of Bohemia. Sigismund is not yet. His father is still in power. But you can see what we call the Wenceslaus bath babes on the bottom right there. That is a bath attendant she's
mm,
washing his hair in the picture on the right, and she's, I guess, horrifically probably picking for lice in the picture on the left. Um,
mm,
but she's wearing a fitted linen undergarment that actually provides breast support. And this is a unique garment to Central Europe in this era. I've not yet found evidence of this kind of garment in England. I haven't found evidence of this exact kind of garment in France. I haven't found it in Spain. But this kind of strappy, fitted, bust supporting garment, actually, we found an extant one, and I didn't include that picture, an extant remnant one in the walls of a castle in Austria from this era. So it actually confirms that these garments were real. They are not an artist conceit. They actually laced on the sides, and they have a waist seam, and then they have skirts pleated into the waist, and they provide really good bust support. So that is a
mm.
realistic undergarment, but it's not the only undergarment a woman would have worn. So let's get to our woman, Teresa.
Aha.
Okay, what can you tell me about Teresa as a person?
Well, she's supposed to be of the lower class. She goes around doing various jobs around the settlement, and then obviously when the attack happens from the Kingdom of Hungary, she's forced to become a refugee, and she goes over and she meets up with her family member, the miller, and herself and Henry stay there for a small little bit. But she's always doing the lower class
Mm,
jobs in society, and she doesn't seem to. She's a very, very nice girl, very, very polite, but she doesn't seem to be the most educated character in the game. So she's always doing the bottom level characters. She does have a kind of the character can choose obviously the if you're playing as Henry, you can choose to have a romantic relationship with the young woman.
of course.
But for the most part, she's kind of just there for the majority of the game, just helping out the miller and do various small little tasks around the town. So she's nothing special in the game. She's very of the low status, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, she looks it, except for that far right picture, which you said is also Teresa. Um,
Mm.
yeah, there's not a shot. Okay, so oh, so much. So in the picture on the left, she's practicing or learning to sword fight. I think you told me.
Playing around with Henry. So
Yes.
if you decide you like the look of her and you want to have a romantic relationship with the poor girl, you can mess around with her and stuff and do a little bit of sword fighting and stuff. Wrestle around and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, as you were pointing out earlier, she is kind of dressed a bit strange for playing around with Henry. So one wonders what's her intentions there.
Yeah, because she's wearing literally her underwear, like her underwear.
Yeah.
So probably in,
Yeah.
in this era, she may have had a bust support garment like this one, but maybe not because my feeling is that it's really more well-heeled women who would have that kind of fitted tailored garment because it has to be tailored. It's not just something you can really throw together on your own, right? So I'm not certain that a woman of her social status would have had that kind of bust support garment. If she did, it would be worn
Mm.
under this white smock that she's wearing there. But and actually the smock isn't bad. I will grant you it actually, if you look in her armpit, which I know no one wants to do, but do it anyway, you can see that there is, I'm not certain, maybe my little, you can see that there is a gore there. It's of a different color fabric,
Mm.
which is wouldn't have been, didn't happen with undergarments. We have zero evidence of that being done with a linen undergarment, because white linen is way cheaper than dyed linen. Dyed linen is expensive for reasons. But having that
Mm.
triangular gore under the arm gives you more range of motion and allows it to fit more comfortably into the curve of your armpit. So that's accurate. That's great. That's a nice touch, even if it's the wrong color. Um, the way it's kind of baggy, that's good. That's what it would be. But this is not something she would have worn in front of a man who was not a relative taking care of her while she was sick, right?
Mm.
So uh, she would have absolutely have a kirtle over top of this, and a kirtle is a kind of the next layer that you would wear that would either lace in the front or lace on the sides, and that would then be covered by yet another garment. But yeah, she needs to be wearing more than this. I don't know what they're
Mm.
thinking there. Um, let me see. I don't think I actually found any. I didn't find any good 1400 representations. There is one. It's in the Tale of the Patient Griseldis, but I just didn't have time to find it in the time I had to rework my
Mm.
images. Anyway, so here's her character shot, the one in the middle. That's kind of what you see uh, at the outset, I guess. I'm just going to say no on so many on the overgarment. I don't know what that thing is supposed to be over top of her. I'm not certain if it's supposed to be an apron. If it's supposed to be an apron, here's how aprons looked in this era. They're waist aprons. They don't have
Okay.
women don't wear chest aprons. It's waist aprons.
Okay, so it's the same thing with Blacksmith.
Yeah,
Okay,
same
that's
thing with blacksmith.
interesting.
There's no, but it could also be what was called a sideless surcoat. But this isn't just a sideless surcoat. It's got, it's just like a big open whatever. So I'm not certain if they were trying to go for. I'm not certain if this one doesn't have it. I forgot to include a picture of a sideless surcoat. But in any case, if it is the so-called sideless surcoat, that's been out of fashion for a long time at this point.
Mm.
Um, and that's ladies aren't wearing that anymore. It's kind of petrified as a royal garment that royalty wore specifically for ceremonial occasions, but it's not a fashion garment and definitely not something a peasant would wear or even a lower class woman would
Mm.
wear. So I don't know what's going on there. Her,
Yeah.
let me see, no, that's the bottom of the picture. The dress she's wearing, short sleeves. I don't really have evidence of short sleeved kirtles from 1400. I only have ever seen long sleeve kirtles from this era. And to just show you,
Yeah,
here's an
the
example of a
same prop.
kirtle, right? The
Mm.
pink dress, the pink dress and the green dress are both kirtles.
Mm,
So
mm, mm, mm. Which I prefer, to be honest.
yeah, right. It looks better, doesn't it? um,
I think it's more ladylike and stuff. I maybe they just I don't know why people I don't know why the media likes t-shirts so much, but I don't know why people like t-shirts so much. Especially like from my interpretation going from Ireland where it's cold and I still find reenactors kicking about with t-shirts on and it's like stop, we're
yeah.
not cold.
Why? Yeah. I mean, there have been eras
Mm.
where short sleeve overgarment was in fashion so that you could see the sleeves of the beautiful thing that's worn right beneath it. But this is, and actually, in about 20 years, short sleeve kirtles will be a thing, but not in 1400.
Mm.
And the dress is way too short, like way too short. It comes down to like mid calf or even just below her knees. That's even for a working woman, a lower class woman, it's going to come down to her ankles. Women, when they wanted
Mm.
to have mobility, because it's cold, it's it's the little ice age, for God's sake. This is Bohemia. We're not talking Spain or Italy. We're not talking, this isn't the 12th century when everything is warm and happy in Europe. It's the little ice age. So you only hike up your skirts when you absolutely have to. And even lower class women would have worn something that went down at least to their ankles simply for the issue of not getting cold. And
Mm. Mm.
let me see if I've got, all right, okay, so you can see here This is from Taquinum Sanitatis from about 1390. So yes, it's Italy, but it still illustrates my point. The top left picture, the grape harvest, that is a laborer, a female laborer, and even there, her skirts
Mm.
come to just above, just at shoe level. So they're not dragging on the ground, but they give her leg full coverage. So I don't know what this is about. When if you look at pictures of women working in the fields, say the hours of John the Duke of Berry, you can see they just kilt their
Mm.
skirts up through their belts if they need to. So
Mm.
you don't need to have a stupidly short dress that does nothing.
Yeah. It's just the same problems reoccurring again and again. It's so interesting because I was completely unaware how bad these problems are, which is first and foremost the 15th century look, the whole kind of football interpretation to maybe trying to appeal to the local audience, and obviously once again the t-shirt look. It's the same problems popping up again and again that you're pointing out in every single one of the clothing, which I was completely oblivious about. I was nice and thought this was absolutely brilliant. So now I can't wait to see what you're going to take apart when it comes down to the second game.
I'm
When we
excited.
redo this again.
I've seen some stills. They might have redeemed themselves, but I'm also hoping they
Well,
didn't
they said
completely
they
redeem
would.
themselves.
Yeah, but they explained what the problem was, and then they said that they would go for more because that's what people demanded. People really were like, "Ray, we want more historical accuracy. We don't want any of this LARP stuff." And I love LARP. LARP is great, but this is historical. It's not LARP. That's the problem.
Right. And you can have historical LARP, right? And that's what this is supposedly is a historical LARP. So this isn't
Mm.
Vampire the Masquerade or, Lord of the Rings. This is the Hussite War, a pretty grim chapter in history, actually.
Yeah. Mm, mm,
uh,
mm, 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 mm.
so yeah, oops, I just pulled this out. So here I'm just showing again options for sort of working class women. Possibly, I just broke my headphones. I'm too energetic. Okay, I think I got them back together. Yeah, so you can see what I mean in the picture on the right of women kilting their skirts up when they need to not have them on the ground, because you can see the woman's got a belt on, and then her dress is bloused over that belt. So that's how a woman
Mm.
would do it. And then the man on the right, you can see what the laborer would have done. He would just strip down to his underthings, to his brays and to his white undershirt, and go to the field and work. And there you can see the kind of weapon that probably the average peasant warrior was wielding in the Hussite War. That flail that man has for
Mm.
threshing, that the woman has too.
Yeah.
Yeah, those those
Mm.
those were the weapons of choice of the peasant warriors. So no swords for your peasant warriors. So this
And I
chapter.
assumed I was
No, go on.
No, I always assumed that weapon was there to try to break the full plate armor because before then, this is my you guys will probably tear me apart with this one, because before then it was all spear oriented. Everyone was using spears, and then I noticed once people start doing this transition period into full plate armor, that's where we start to get these sort of weapons. So you'll probably tear me apart now, and the
Right.
comment section will probably tear me apart. But I think that's to deal with the full plate armor, is it?
Well, I mean, I I'm assuming that it was effective that way, but it started off because this is when you start getting peasants becoming mercenaries, right? And joining these
Ah, that's
populist
interesting.
movements. You've got Wat Tyler's rebellion in England, like this. The post plague era is when farmers start getting the idea that they can take their destiny into their own hands. And what is
Oh,
it what
right,
what
yeah.
is it they have at their disposal and already know how to use effectively? The thresher, farm equipment, right? So
Mm.
a lot of implements that end up being effective against mounted knights actually start off as farming equipment. So
It's absolutely fascinating because the same thing happens in Ireland, um, with the kind of the snowfall effect. What was it? Snowball effect that happens with the peasants' revolt in England,
right.
where just as England's having the peasants' revolt, Ireland has the Gaelic resurgence that really sparks off in 1370, led by Art MacMore Cavanagh, who goes as far as not sieging Dublin, but he's outside the walls of Dublin and he's demanding a black tribute. And him and his entire peasantry they're not, well, not just even the peasantry, all the Gaelic and Anglo-Irish nobles, they're just not paying their rent anymore. Good luck, England. So it's very interesting that there's a huge snowball effect that's happening through all of Europe as well. It's not just happening in my books and literature, that's actually happening all over the place. That's
Right.
quite interesting to me.
It's the plague really is one of those pivotal moments when history resets itself, social history resets itself. It
Mm, mm,
opens
mm,
up, it opens up the, the world, Europe's eyes to so many new ideas, and that's when, yeah, so it's not, definitely not just England, not just Ireland. It's and it continues happening throughout the 15th century. The Hundred Years War is kind of that, it piggybacks onto the Hundred Years War, and you get all these mercenary troops that are really were peasants originally, trying to make their fortune by
mm,
looting during the Hundred Years War. And then, of course, in the 16th century, during the full-blown Reformation, it gets super ugly in Central Europe. Peasants' revolts in
mm.
Germany. So many castles were actually destroyed in Germany in the early 16th century by these peasants who have taken up arms, and that's kind of the end of the age of chivalry, because these peasants' farming tools are actually pretty effective against a mounted. Anyway, I'll probably get excoriated
Mm,
in the
mm.
comments too, and that, but that's fine. Engagement is engagement.
That's always good. Yeah, that's
Right.
it. But I always like having an intelligent discussion. As long as people are using their sources and stuff,
Yeah.
there's nothing worse than somebody who goes into the comment section, doesn't use sources, and their constant argument is, my feelings are you're an idiot. Oh, sorry, that doesn't work. Plus, your comment's going to get removed by the algorithm. If you're going to come into the comment section, you'd want to keep your comment there by first off saying, I disagree with you, and secondly, then providing the sources, because then you can actually make me look like a fool.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. No, I ditto. I'm all about discourse. I am happy to have a civil, respectful exchange and disagreement and come to new conclusions with new information. I will not tolerate ad hominem attacks at all in my comment section.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Same
Plus,
same thing.
the algorithm is just going to remove the comments, so you're wasting your time.
You really are. Although somehow they sometimes still slip through on mine, but anyway. Oh, you know what? They end up in the held for review section, and I really should just not look there.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to Our Lady. So the picture on the right, when you told me that this was the same woman, I couldn't believe you. Um, so many
Mm,
things.
mm, mm,
There's no way that a lower class woman like Teresa would have had an ensemble like this for so many reasons.
mm, mm.
I, I can't really tell necessarily what's going on at the sleeve area. I think this is actually a surcoat she's supposed to be wearing over top of a green gown, maybe. I'm not I'm not certain
Mm.
what the layers are here, but the silhouette is actually way too early for her. Uh, this is the silhouette that she's kind of got going on, and you can see
Uh,
the hand slits over the skirt. Those aren't decorative, by the way. Those slits over this woman's skirt right around her pelvis, those are actually slits. And she can actually, her belt and her pouch are on her kirtle, which is under that coat. And so she can actually
mm.
access her belt through those slits. So this on her dress, they've made those decorative, those white stripes, but they weren't decorative. They were actually openings to the gown underneath. Um, yeah.
Mm.
So the red, oh my God, that red is the most expensive dye stuff in Europe. There is no way she would
Oh,
have
so
had that
definitely
dress.
not for a low level peasant.
Mm-mm.
No.
No, she could have absolutely obtained a garment dyed with madder, and a couple of other plant-based red dyes, but Kermes is not plant-based. That's an insect, and that creates a whole complex, this deep red that you see here. A madder red is kind of
Mm.
more brown orange in tone and not as deep and not as vibrant, not as nuanced and three-dimensional as this red is. So
And
she wouldn't have had it.
I think from what I recall as well, you can steal, as in buy or get a dress for herself. If Henry in the video, in reality, had taken a dress of that quality and given it to herself, was she allowed to wear it, or are
Mm.
there laws to prevent her from
So
wearing it like there would have been in Ireland?
right. So I'm not certain what Bohemia's the Kingdom of Bohemia's sumptuary laws were in this era, if they
Mm.
applied to color, they usually apply to fabric type rather than dye stuff. But if he had stolen,
Ah.
if he had, yeah, so probably not is going to be my short answer, because just the fabric itself is probably too expensive for her social class. I'm going to
Mm,
bet
mm.
if Bohemia has any sumptuary laws, it's going to prevent it's going to be there to prevent the rising merchant class from dressing above their station,
Ah.
and she's not even in the rising merchant class.
Yeah,
So
I was just thinking that. So even if Henry had, which there is, because it's a role-playing game, there are situations where Henry can rob that stuff, go in, sneak into the castle, rob it, and then come back out and just give it to herself to try to impress her a wee bit. She wouldn't have worn that. She would have been like, "No, Henry, give that back. That's not right." In reality, that's
yeah,
what would have happened.
exactly. And this dress is absolutely, even as a fashionable lady of this era, it's not quite right. Now the boat neckline is okay, but actually in Bohemia, if this is a fashionable dress, um, just check out the necklines on these dresses. Um, they are
Mm.
they're off the shoulder and they're low. So if she's actually a fashionable lady of this era, or if she's wearing the dress of a fashionable lady of this era, this is what she should be going for here. This really super revealing, cleavage bearing, off the shoulder look. It shouldn't be that sort of shallow boat neckline, which is much more English in the
Mm.
cut. And but you can also see that even then the sleeves the sleeves should be fitted, like they should be really, they should be really fitted to her arm and show the curve of her muscles and have a little bit of cuff that comes over her wrist or her knuckles. So if this is a fashionable dress, it's not right either for any period. Yeah, it's not right. And it looks like she has gathered cuffs on her smock, the white undergarment. If you look by her wrist,
Yeah.
if you look by her wrist, you can see that it's like there's some kind of gathering there. That's not. That's just not
Mm.
done in this era on smocks, on anyone's smocks, really.
So it really is in the kind of fantasy realm, when the creative staff had put this one together.
Yes,
Because I
yeah,
think this is the dress that you can steal and give it to her missus to try to charm her and stuff. So in the game, the video game, she accepts it and she walks around with it and stuff. So I'm assuming in reality, no, she would have said, "No, Henry, I'm not taking that. You put that back now, Henry."
no, his best bet would be to sell it and pocket the money and then buy her a garment that's actually appropriate for her station and won't get her fined or arrested. Um,
Mm,
and so her hair, so I was actually, I'm going to admit, impressed with her hair in in her Sunday best, as you call it, that they actually
mm.
got the front braid look correct. I will show you.
Ah.
I was for fashionable ladies. So you see here, the
Mm,
queen who's accepting that book from the monk, or princess.
mm,
Yeah. Um, you see that she's got the braids there that have been, and the lady right behind her, her lady in waiting does as well. She's got those front
mm,
braids. So I was actually impressed. That's a look that stays in fashion for a little bit of time. See here, you can see this is an English lady. So you can see what I was talking
mm,
about. How what she's wearing is more of an English neckline, like it's much higher, it's much more modest, versus the Bohemian
mm.
neckline, which is not any of those things. But yeah, I was impressed that they actually got the right hair to go with this level of garment from the 1390s. So actually, I'm going to give them kudos to
Mm.
that, even though I'm pretty certain Teresa never would have worn her hair that way, because that's a
Oh,
noble
really?
woman. Yeah, I mean that's fashionable, right? She's a
Mm,
peasant. She should be
mm.
wearing a hood if she's actually dressing to her station. If you look at the lady in green with the red hood,
Ah, see.
that red hood that
Mm,
she's wearing, that's more in line with what Teresa should be wearing. And her hair would probably
mm,
just be in braids, maybe even taped to her head, braids like maybe something like these ladies have to keep it out of the way. So her having her hair down is not really on, and having it just in a ponytail, nah, you wouldn't want that. That's, as someone who has long hair and has an active lifestyle, especially if you're going out and kicking ass and taking names, you don't want your hair down. You want it
Mm-hmm.
strapped to your head as tightly as possible to keep it out of the way.
Yeah,
Also, because
especially when
gosh,
Teresa's so hands on.
yeah, go
Mm.
on, go on. So you told me Teresa actually goes out and like you can actually, has
She, so when
fights.
when they're attacked up in the main settlement at the start of the game, Teresa has to make her way down, and you can even play as Teresa as a kind of side
Mm,
quest and try to make your
love
way
it.
down to the miller's place. And it's funny that you should say that about Henry as well, where Henry gives the gift over to herself. You can also choose to give over to the miller and sell that garment to the miller and make a bit of a
Oh,
profit. So anything you raw steal in the game, you can sell to the miller. Also, just to the comment section, sorry guys, there's a bit of a delay. So anytime you guys comment, because there's comments coming in about the peasants' revolt earlier on and the
oh,
Swedish War of Independence, which
right.
is slightly out of our field of, I don't know how much you know about the Swedish War of Independence. It's slightly out of my field of expertise. I need to learn about the Swedish War of Independence, by the way, because trade links between Scandinavia
Mm,
into Scotland and Ireland is heavily affected in that period. And
right.
also the weapons and arms are coming into both Scotland and into the Gaelic side of Ireland. Very important. So Thomas, thank you so much for your feedback there on the
Oh,
Swedish War
Thomas,
of
it's
Independence.
Thomas. I miss you, Thomas. He's one of my
Miss,
super
sorry,
fans.
sorry. I'm butchery now going between all the stuff because the writing is tiny on my phone right now, so I'm going between the two. So sorry about all that. But just to confirm, there's a slight delay in our response. I think it's about 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So some of the comment section is kind of commenting slightly behind. So just be aware of that, guys, as you're coming in. So we'll be slightly behind in the comments.
Well, let's
Just to respond to
yeah, let's pause. Let's pause with Teresa and handle any questions or comments right now.
Just to respond over to Ryan, yeah, you'll be able to, once we're finished here, you'll be able to watch all this stuff over again. And finally, back to Ryan again. Yeah, the what was it? The game will be out on February 5th for anybody that wants to purchase this game. And when you buy the game, definitely pay attention to the clothing and stuff because we'll go and revive all this stuff later. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it with the comment section that I can see for the time being.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So that's quite fascinating that we see the same problems reoccurring again. I think we were talking about the what was it? The hats and stuff as well, because she's supposed to be wearing a hat, isn't it?
Right. So yeah, she should, like I said, so the hair. So why her hair should be bound up, and the reason I asked you about what she does in the game, ladies, ladies, this is terrible that I have to talk about this, but things are getting kind of rough in the world. Keeping your hair in braids and bound to your head is a way to make sure your hair doesn't get used as a weapon against you. Because if she's going
Yeah.
out there in this chaotic time where there are brigands running about, they're going to try to capture her by her hair and use it to hold her down. So if she keeps her hair, actually, this is why I think she would be more likely to keep her hair up like this in these braids you see around these ladies on the right, right? And you actually achieve that by using a ribbon to basically whip stitch your hair to your head. So
Mm.
yeah, so at the very least, her hair should be up like that. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Um, she should probably be wearing a hood like this over top of it for many reasons, one of which is warmth. Yeah. So that's basically my input on Teresa.
Mm.
She wouldn't keep her hair down like that in a ponytail at the back. She would keep it up, and she would be unlikely to ever style her hair in that very courtly, fashionable style because she's not at that level of society, and she doesn't have someone to help her do her hair that way. It's You can
Mm.
do your own hair that
Yeah.
way, but it actually involves stitching. you actually you actually
Yeah.
have to
And
stitch those braids into place. So
yeah, it kind of makes no sense as well because it's just her and the miller, and Kate, unless she's in the house all day waiting for Henry to come back.
right.
So and the thing is that she's trying to do jobs for the miller because she wants to repay the miller for being so kind to her and stuff, which could explain the situation she probably is in the second game. Because as you were pointing out, she's just kind of funny going into the second game.
Yeah. Oh boy. Oh my God. Yeah. So I can, spoiler alert, Teresa's clothes get real bad in the second game, from what I can see.
Mm.
Real bad. Uh,
What about her belt? What do
oh,
you think of her
yeah,
belt?
the
Is
belt
it the
is
same?
it's terrible. So on the right, she's got some kind of chain thing that looks like it's from the 1990s.
Oh, that
They
bad.
yeah, that bad. No, that's a hard no. And then in the middle picture, she's wearing what it's kind of I don't have the best quality on this one. It looks like a leather belt. That's okay. Women definitely wore leather belts in this era, especially women of her stature. Trying to see if um, so on the queen here, you can see she's wearing her belt under the overgarment, and that's how they did it. They wore they wore their belts between the surcoat, the overcoat, and the kirtle, the fitted garment that they wore against their bodies. Can you guess why they
Mm.
might have worn their belts under the overlayer?
Tidy up and keep it tight, perhaps? No?
It's a safety thing. So it's
Ah.
really hard to have a cut purse come and cut the strings of your purse if it's under your overdress.
Mm.
So very frequently, women, you see them almost always. If you see a belt with a purse on it, it's over top of their kirtle and under their overgarment,
Mm.
not over their overgarment. I'm trying to see if this one, yeah. So this has his belt, but it doesn't show her belt so much.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
so, but as for the specific, you can see the belts in this era were very decorative. They had a lot of fittings, and even the lower class
Mm.
people, if they had an income, could still afford a belt with pewter fittings. So on this
Mm.
queen's belt, you can see the little circles on the belt, and that's a
Mm.
sort of the artist's nod to the pewter fittings. So since you're talking about belts, let's make that transition. um, so these are some shots of some of the belts, some of the many belts of our Henry VIII character, who's not actually Henry VIII.
Oh, no.
Um, and yeah, we've got like three kinds of belts going on here, and some of them are
Big
more
belt on top
plausible
of
than
belt.
others. Um,
Mm.
so I'm going to show you sort of a combination of belt types. Now these are by Armor and Castings, who make excellent. They're a
Mm.
Ukrainian jeweler, and they make excellent reproduction casting items from ancient history all the way through to like the 17th century. So good place to go. Um, the belt there on the left, that's the kind of belt that Teresa probably would have worn. The brown leather one with
Mm.
kind of the simple, those are brass fittings. Brass might be a little too much for her. She might have had pewter instead, or Latin, as the sort of cheapish gold medal was called at the time. That's the kind of she would have had a belt end like that, like the tip on the tip of the belt, and it would have had a buckle. Could have that would have been one of the options for a buckle for her. Even in a
Mm.
lower class, if she had any kind of base income at all or access to funds, she probably would have had a belt like this. Um, the one on the right is a reproduction of uh, based based on several extant fabric belts. So a lot of belts for the upper classes were not leather. Actually,
Mm.
they were
Mm.
made of super expensive silks, silk velvet, silk damask, or they were woven from silk, tablet woven. So Sigismund would probably be wearing a belt like this, not a leather belt.
Mm.
Even to go into battle, he probably would have had it. Now there's leather on the inside. There's a leather core, but it's covered in that rich fabric. So this is
Mm.
kind of more like what Sigismund should be wearing, not the plain kind
Mm.
of red leather belt that he's wearing. And maybe even our Henry VIII character should be wearing a belt more like this. So instead of this, which isn't bad, but probably isn't really right for his station, it should be more like
Mm.
this. And we've got different belt fittings here. So we talked about purses. So they actually had purse hangers, little metal hangers that you would attach to the belt, and you would put your purse strings through that. You wouldn't attach it to the leather itself because that would
Mm.
make or the belt itself that would make it bend. You attach it to the purse hanger, and I actually have one, and I should have
Mm.
brought that out and showed it, but I didn't because apparently I'm not clever
Mm.
enough for
Mm.
that. And these are different kinds of belt ends and strap ends and belt mounts that she would have that Bohemians would have they were very similar, if not the same, in Bohemia, and they would have used to decorate their belts. So this is what our characters should be wearing um,
Hmm.
in in our thing. But this is what they tend to be. What we tend to see them in are belts that actually look like this, and they are actually closer to your Viking friends. Um,
Yeah, because I do recognize all those belts from the period I mostly delve into,
right,
and yeah, but it's still crazy because he's still wearing multi belts and stuff instead of just having the one belt on.
right, yeah,
He's still going
yeah.
multi belt on top of that. So yeah, it is absolutely mental. It's still mental to me,
I mean,
like
he's got a
you know,
placard
and
belt.
it's still
Yeah, it's mm, go on.
yeah, there's a lot going on there.
It, yeah, he's got this placard belt, which is, um, I mean, yes, they were still in fashion in the 1390s. I'm not. I think they might be making their way. They might even still be in the 1410s. But then he's got
Mm,
these two other belts, and he's got one around his waist. I don't know what that's for. And then presumably that's a sword belt. I guess the one
yeah.
that's kind of strung diagonally across his hips. It looks like there's a sword
Mm.
kind of there in that bottom left picture. But even still, that looks kind of closer to these belts
Yeah,
than
absolutely mental. So he's not using magnets this time.
no.
In this time, he's overkill. He's the other way around, where he's using too many belts for the one sword. Yeah,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So those are yeah, I'm hoping that in the next one that they will actually take in, that more into account. The
hopefully.
nobility weren't just doing leather. It was leather, leather, leather. There, no, fabric, expensive. The thing that has color is fabric. Although you can dye leather, and they
Mhm.
did dye leather. There's 15th century dye manuals that talk about it, but still. Okay, hats. So I just kind of promised that we would sort of wrap up with a couple of general things about hats in Bohemia in this era, and also you can kind of see the kind of silhouettes and clothing that uh, merchants and upper class knights and nobility were wearing in this era. So you've got all kinds of shapes of hats, right? You've got the miller's hat there is kind of seen there on the left, the baggy folded over floppy hat thing is on the gentleman on the left there. So if you go back up here to the miller, right, see his floppy hat, and then
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, you see the floppy hat, and then you look at our guy there, the guy on the left. It's a very very similar hat. So you know. They actually do get it right. You can also see the different kinds of facial hair that are in fashion in sort of this, it's kind of the forked goatee as I call it,
Mm.
is really fashionable right now in this part of the world, or clean shaven. So that is really captured. Let me see, was it Sigismund? Did he have a fork? He does not. He's got the full beard. Yeah. So
No,
he doesn't have the fashionable forked beard. Although maybe in the on the far right there, or in his campaign picture, maybe it's forked and it just doesn't quite look like it from the side.
yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, so that's but the hair that's fashionable is definitely kind of that like almost jaw length or just at the ear level, full kind of hair, which I will grant them they do manage to capture in sort of in Sigismund, except they then give him Shirley Temple curls, which that's a choice.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah, they kind of went mad with the creative side of it. Like, because you can still imagine the historian giving this stuff over and then saying, yeah, that looks nice, but this is my interpretation, and then just flying off with it. Like, yeah, you can see it straight away. Like, but it's the same problem we're seeing throughout, like, where we can see, compared to the Viking side, where it's just, this is going in the bin, we're doing bikers, and that's that. You can still see the hints that the historian had influenced, but then the creative team just really saying, okay, this is what we're doing instead, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And speaking, you're exactly right. I mean, you can, you can almost see the things that were left behind. Like they didn't discard it all; they kept some of it and then just made up the rest. So the thing,
Mm-hmm.
speaking of hair, Hans's hair, no, just this is not the right look for this era. For one, they don't. I don't think you can achieve this kind of fade that he has in the back using a straight razor. I think you can either go clean shaven or not. I don't. He's kind of that military fade. Um, so I'm not.
Mm,
You
mm.
know, what is if you're going to go for short hair, it's kind of more the bowl cut you see on the right here, and you definitely don't. You're not gelling your bangs back into a fashionable windswept look. That's not being done now. So maybe Hans will have better hair in the next one. We'll see. And then just one last little detail on the subject of color. So on the left we have a 1400 circa 1400 depiction of a camp, a war camp basically,
Mm.
and you can see the pavilions are beautiful and colorful and painted and decorative, and these are the kind of pavilions they really have in this era. And then on the right we have the campaign encampment from the game, and that's actually that style of tent doesn't seem to come into existence until like the second half of the 15th century. So
Ah,
and that style, yeah. So we know that the left is not just an artist's whimsy, because there are expense accounts from the 15th century that specify these pavilions made in these amazing fabrics, and I mean silk. They were making these pavilions out of silk damask, um, and painting them in these amazing patterns. So I know that was a real thing. It's not just the artist's whimsy in this case.
mm.
So probably it's too late to make their war camps a little more colorful and a little less depressing, but it would be nice.
Yeah, I think it will be as well, to be honest with you. And hopefully we'll see a lot more of that going into the second game.
Yeah.
And we stop seeing the same repeat of the same kind of, late 15th century kind of modern football game I don't know,
Silhouette.
I don't want to
Yeah.
say, I don't want to be attacking people now, like, but that kind of
Yeah.
interpretation that keeps reappearing over and over again, like,
Yeah. It is to me. I just it's fantasy, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it as fantasy. And I want to emphasize, just like you, I want to emphasize this isn't a question of snobbery. It's a question of the game portraying itself as being a historical game. So, therefore,
mm, mm,
it's not like it's set in 10,000 BC and we have no idea how people dressed. It's set in
mm,
1400.
mm.
We know how people dressed.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one huge problem going on here, like.
Okay, well, I think those were all the characters we were going to cover today. And I guess so. The question I have for you, Philip, what do you think? Authentic or atrocious, or something less judgmental in between?
Well, I didn't think it was that bad until we had our chat today, and there's a part of me that's really, really glad we had the conversation, because now I'm much more wiser than what I was. But when it came down to the whole my immersion is now broken, and hopefully will be fixed going into the second game. Although I am quite excited going into the second game, to see if they fix the problems or not, because they do promise that they have fixed a lot of these problems going into the second game, because we're not the only ones who complained here. There is a lot of people that did complain, and there's even people that went off and made mods for this game so it was more historically accurate.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not the only ones, and it was so funny that once again you could see the signs that the historical team had put this together, and then you could see the creative team decided, oh, we're just going to run with it, and hopefully they won't do it for the second time. And as you were saying there, Rachel, early on, actually, it looks like in the trailers that have been brought out that it looks like it is fitting more into the historical side this time around. So hopefully we've been pleased. Just to pop over to the what was it, the question, if anybody has any last questions there. I know there's a delay, so we
Yeah.
probably won't be able to answer anything, because I think the delay was about 4 or 5 minutes. I think Ryan here was bitching about my Irish in the last video. Ryan, my Irish is Munster Irish, so it might be a bit different to what you're used to. And I'm gonna keep to my Munster Irish, because that was the Irish I was taught by my father and my grandmother and stuff. I don't speak your foreign Ulster and Leinster tongues, or Connacht, depending on what your interpretation is.
Nice.
So I'll be keeping to my old Munster Irish. Not related to crows, but did you know Cadillacs was an older English saying of no, I was unaware of that interpretation of older English as well, Ryan. So yeah, I think that's pretty much us finished today when it comes down to our conversation to do with clothing in Kingdom Come. Um,
Yeah, if you guys
is
have
there
any
anything else you want to
questions, if you have
add?
any questions and we don't get to them in the live chat, if you put them in the comments, I will answer them and I'll make sure
Mm.
that Philip does too.
Yeah, hopefully it appears because one problem I'm having as well is that Rachel will get the notification for the question and stuff, and then I'm go looking through it and I actually can't find it. So if I don't answer it, I'll find other means to try to answer it, or probably in a future video and stuff, because I know there's questions on the brat.
Yep.
So we'll try to go back into clothing to do with the 15th century Ireland because we've covered Scotland a tiny bit. We
Yep.
want to go back over to Scotland again
Yep.
this month, especially with 15th century being
So
very
big right now.
active
Yeah.
this month with the algorithm, thankfully to Kingdom Come. So we will probably go back over Gaelic and lowland clothing and Anglo-Irish clothing and all that stuff again, and try to specialize. Definitely try to cover Irish clothing for this month. Rachel, thanks for having me on because,
Oh,
gee,
no.
there was loads of questions I had with the video game, and gee, you really are an entire encyclopedia of information. So much stuff because I mostly cover the early medieval Irish clothing and stuff. So for me, wow, so much stuff to learn here. Even for me to watch back over and try to pick up all the information. I know a few people came into the chat there and said that they wanted to go back over. Yeah, this will be up. Rachel's going to
Yep.
go over and edit, take out a few
Yep.
bits because there's a slight delay, and also at the very start, Discord. It was Discord to start with. Discord started a huge problem at the very start.
Yeah.
It's had updates recently, so myself and Rachel, who work on Discord, doing the historical stuff, have had problems all week with the blasted thing.
Yep.
And then when we did have that over, there was problems with the OBS, there was problems with YouTube. All these blastering updates have
Yep.
caused everything to be up in the air. And it's like we go off and we do our rehearsals yesterday,
Yep.
and then today, when we're doing this live, problem after problem after problem. And it's like, geez, we're busy people here. We have classes to run.
Right.
We have YouTube videos to make. And then with these problems with these updates, so thanks, Rachel, for sticking in with me and answering all the questions I had with this video game, even while these frustrating updates and problems that we're having.
It was,
And
yeah.
thank you so much for bringing me onto your channel, Rachel.
Oh, no. You know what? So, everyone, I just want you to know Philip reached out to me, I don't know, 30 years ago. It feels like forever ago at this point, and actually
Yeah.
started the dialogue. And that's when we connected. And so, this partnership is really thanks to you, Philip. And it's been a blast. I've really been enjoying our collaborations, and I know all of my followers definitely have because you've brought all your trove of knowledge, which medieval Ireland is a mystery to most of us for reasons that we've
Mm,
discussed.
mm, mm.
So I really thank you for coming on and being my foil today.
Oh,
And
you're more
actually, you're the one who went and dug out all of these stills for me to critique. So you did a good chunk of work yourself, just getting through that game.
you're-
So I thank
Oh
you.
no, no, I still
No, go on.
I think you deserve more of the